motion?
The move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Edits?
I would just like to be on the record regarding the sign replacement, if you will, for treated work on at the end of Monona Drive. That my recommendation, my first choice and recommendation is to remove the center structure altogether in landscape. I mentioned that.
Okay.
When it didn't show up in there. I would like that to be
For the record?
on record.
Thank you. Mr. Hamburg?
Page 1, item 6A, if you could put a note in there that I abstained on that item.
Any other edits, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor as edited, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, minutes are approved. Appearances, is there anyone here wishes to appear on an item not on the agenda? Seeing that there's none, we'll move on to unfinished business 5A, public hearing on the request for zoning permit precise implementation plan on a proposed new construction at 7,000, on a 7,000 square foot Meineke Car Care Center at 1,000 East Broadway, represented by Bob Pook, Pock, sorry, thank you. And would you like to, who's going to speak? Yep. Please, thank you.
Proctor, 6101 Gateway Green. So I'm the attorney for the applicant, and I've never get to say my address, being in my home city. So I am a Mononan, so a very proud Mononan. This is the second time this project's been in front of you all. We've read the staff report, and we agree with all the conditions listed by staff. All 9 conditions that I see, I believe those are the only conditions that we know of, and we're available to answer any questions as to any of the issues, if there's any additional questions. I assume there's going to be questions regarding the west exterior of the building, and I'm happy to speak to that, but whatever question you have about it.
Okay. Thank you. If you'd like to stay there for a second, anybody else wish to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing section. We'll move on to consideration of action on the request. Sonia?
So this was last reviewed pre-hearing conference on September 28th, and approval is recommended with 1 finding of fact and 9 conditions of approval, including number 2, which states that CDA and City Council approval is required because it's in redevelopment area number 6 prior to building permits. Conditions 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all related to the engineering review that was done by Vierbecker. And let's see, 7 regarding MMSD connection fees, number 8 regarding fire code compliance, 9 regarding future signage, and then I wanted to add in number 10. It was discussed at the pre-hearing conference, and I meant to include it as a recommended condition that dumpsters and any auto parts shall be contained within the building as shown on the floor plan submitted. And then regarding the architectural materials on the 4th building elevation, that was recommended by staff at the last meeting to be changed to masonry to meet the code requirements under architectural compatibility for consistent architecture on 4 sides. The Plan Commission requested additional information to see if that was in fact something they would require. So let's see, Excel Engineering submitted some additional information on the site context to show that tree line that's out there on the west side. And then a few other things. The landscaping was a recommendation to be increased, and it went from 288 points to 381. 330 points is the requirement, so it exceeds that. A tree island was added to break up the parking stalls, and arborvitae were added on the south side of the parking lot.
What were the points, 288 to what?
It was increased from 288 to 381.
Okay. Thank you. Commission members, comments? Mr. Humber?
Couple comments. First, I wasn't able to be here at last meeting, and I really like the architecture. I think, and no offense, it's it's a long, thin building with a lot of garage doors, but I like what you've done. I like the tower element on the front and the use of the brick, the banding, the drive it or on top. I think you've done a great job. But, there's a but coming. I drive the Beltline every day, at least once a day, and I look at it coming eastbound, and you can see this. You can see the west side. And I think for reference for the rest of the commission, if you didn't get a chance to get out there, we had this same thing when UW Clinic was here. And if you remember the presentation, there was not going to be visible whatsoever. In fact, they stood here, and it'll be on the tape, and said, we're not even going to ask for a sign because we don't think you'll even be able to see a sign. Well, as we all know, after it became very visible, and now they put a sign on it, and we didn't get the architecture we should have pushed for on the back. That doesn't match the front of the building. I think, honestly, you've done a fabulous job on architecture. I think we're just not hitting the finish line. You've got 3 sides plus wrapping the one corner, and I feel very strongly we should wrap that around the west side. You can see it. And between this building and right now the nicest looking building we have there is the Madison Met pumping station. And they will both help hide the one that we didn't hold up to the standard that we should have. The leaves fall off the trees. When you drive down there, I saw the pictures. When you drive down there, it's pretty evident. And the back of the clinic's very evident. The sign that they weren't going to put on is evident. I don't begrudge them for the sign. I think it's great to have some sign out there, but it's just when applicants come here and say, well, you're not going to be able to see it, those trees that are hiding it, number one, are deciduous, so leaves fall off, and number two, they're not under the applicant's control. The DOT can come in and clear cut that if they choose to. So I think, for me, learning from the second to last one that was there, for me, it's important to do that. I had couple other questions. Did you discuss outdoor storage of vehicles when you reviewed this last time?
There was a little discussion around parking. Just noted that right now the plans show 22 parking spaces, but only 16 are required per the zoning code. So there was some question about what those additional stalls were really going to be used for. So.
Well, I think they need the stalls around the business. I think it's fine. It's just in this design district, we haven't allowed storage of cars. We've worked really hard to get it out of there, or car sales, if you remember, that's a special permit. So I'm just wondering what the intention is and what we can craft so we make sure we're protected. And perhaps Meineke doesn't have that intention, but perhaps someday you sell the building to somebody else, and we need to make sure what's been allowed at that site. Because we used to have a lot of cars being stored pretty close to this area. I'm sure if you've been in Monona for a while, you remember, and it wasn't the best entrance to Monona. So we've worked really hard in this design district to try to hold the standard up on that. And then the last comment I had was, has anybody looked at wetlands? Has there been a delineation on the site? Okay, good, great. And you're out of the wetlands?
Yeah, no, I can.
Oh, you did? Oh, see, now, I looked at your proposal, I thought, oh, that was smart. The lot's just over an acre, but you're only showing a disturbed area of only under an acre, so I thought, well, they don't have to get an NOI that way. Because if you got an NOI, then they've taken the hits and they've looked at it.
Yeah, I should say, I know we looked into a lot of remediation and anything in that regard. And I can't recall if we actually did that.
Well, I see that you're careful showing your disturbed area under an acre, and the lot itself is just over an acre, and I do the same thing if it were me. But if you don't go through the approval process through the DNR, then they don't research it for wetlands. So we just have to make sure you're, with your discharge pipe there on the southwest corner, you're staying out of the wetlands. But you're good, you had a delineation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Did you want to come? You said you were...
Yeah, I can comment on the
West
outdoor
elevation.
storage. We can craft something easy. This isn't our first Meineke and we put them in what we kind of like to think higher scale areas. The idea of this Meineke is really to compete with the dealerships. Mm-hmm. And so it's not our intent to have it look like a used car lot. The only cars that are overnight are generally drop-offs. There's no stored vehicles at all, certainly no owned vehicles like put out there for sale or just sitting out there. If a car's being worked on overnight, it sits in the stall within the building. But if you come by and say, hey, I want to drop my car off at night and put the keys in the drop box, you can put them in there, but you're talking we wish we had 22 drop-offs a night, but we won't. You're talking about maybe one drop-off or one or two pickups where, we leave the keys in the car, and so that's it.
Chairman.
So a condition of no car sales and no long-term storage of vehicles outdoors would be acceptable?
Yeah, that's absolutely
And
no problem.
would that suit everyone on the commission that we just talked about, no long-term? I
Yep.
agree. You drop them off, or you might leave a car out there for somebody, they might have a second set of
The
keys.
keys
or
to
something.
pick up, yep.
And that's just running the business. What we don't want to get into is when there's just a fleet of old cars waiting to be repaired there for a week
Yep.
or a month at a time.
Yep, absolutely. And if you want me to speak to the four-side architecture, what you really have here is, I think, is just a financing issue. If we could do whatever we wanted, we'd absolutely put the four-side on the building. And there is a financing gap already on this project, as so many of these projects on that the Broadway corridor, there's soils issues. And we expect that there's going to be a large request for TIF. We've already talked to staff, and we'll be talking to the CDA, and the question becomes, if we do the four-side architecture, you're adding almost another $80,000 to the project. And so the question only becomes, as we create this financing gap that will end up being at least part of it hopefully closed by the city, it becomes a weighing of what's important and what's not, and whether you can see it. I didn't think you could see it, but I'm not going to tell you. I don't have a crystal ball, and I never have looked in winter to see whether I can see it, and so I don't know. I just assumed with all the trees that are there, the large area with the wetlands, that it's not viewable. Whether or not it is, I can't tell you as a matter of fact. But I do think that there's this issue. That's a big chunk of money, and I would say that I think this project is a fantastic project for that lot. Where you're going to find a 1.8 million tax base project on a lot that's doesn't even front the road other than the driveway, that will, even with TIF money be given to the owner, generally be a net gain for a long period of time in that TIF district. And our position is that we don't believe it's going to be visible, and if it is, it's very minor so, and so the question just becomes financing. Would love to do the four-side. It's $80,000. That's just going to be another addition to the financing gap caused by the soil problem, which we have to deal with, so.
Thank you.
I don't think that the visibility is that great where it would warrant having to, I'm sensitive to the cost of the project, but speaking to Mr. Honberg's comments about, we don't know if those woods are going to be removed at some point, or what the visibility is going to be like during the winter. Putting in additional landscaping of larger coniferous trees to break up the facade of that building is a substantially cheaper solution than brick cladding all the way around, and could actually be a nice touch if it were ever to be more visible in the winter. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments?
Also speaking to that west elevation, the metal siding can become a architectural element if you were to say wrap the corner around the side just beyond that window, and then run a 6-foot section of brick up somewhere in the middle around another window. All of a sudden you've brought the materials all the way around the building, and the siding just becomes an architectural element as opposed to breaking the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So coming a little bit around the corner and say running a column somewhere else to break it up, I think that'd be very acceptable. The fact that it covers the entire side looks like exactly what you're doing, and just kind of, understandably because of the dollars, but bailing out on the back side of the building. So if there's just a little bit of a wrap there and a little bit of brick introduced on that side, I think it feel more, like an architectural detail, as it were. It just becomes a little more of an acceptable material to have.
I think they're two very good ideas, just without pricing them. I think that the landscape idea is a really good idea and pretty easy. With the wrapping and the brick, I don't know the costs. That's the only issue. It seems like a pretty reasonable solution, but And so I don't know how, I mean, the reality is that we would do as much as we can finance, and how much we can finance is going to depend on further approvals down the road. So I'm not quite sure how to answer some of the questions. I would love to do the entire west side if the TIF financing goes a good way. So, but I don't know how to answer to that as a condition. If you can draft a condition that says, you know, some added elements of architecture, kind of in the vein that, you know, that you said, and some landscaping, I think that's something that we could put down as being right now, and if it needed to be changed, or I don't know how you want to do it, I mean, without seeing it.
Griff, any comments?
No, the record should probably show I should abstain from this
All right,
issue.
thank you. Is there a motion?
I'm not exactly sure how to craft this motion on the facade. It's going to be rather soft, so are we comfortable, how are we comfortable with the facade then need to come back for final approval to the Plan Commission? Or is there some version of it that we're
Well,
comfortable crafting that staff can approve?
The point on the TIF, I mean, the numbers, I mean, the added cost may not, you know, the TIF may not support.
But this isn't TIF, this is our design district.
Understand.
So we need to talk about it.
So then, are there other alternatives? I mean, what I've heard tonight is wrap the whole west elevation. I've heard shield it with some landscaping that would be under their control, that they would be responsible for. And the third one was to wrap the corners, add some additional brick, and make it an architectural element. It is quite a ways from the belt line, and you know, in my opinion, when you're traveling the belt line, yeah, if you're looking to see it, you can see it, but you're probably not going to be. Hopefully, you're paying a little more attention to your driving than staring at the back of the west elevation. So, what's your timing? What other hoops do you have to
My
jump through?
suggestion was, I believe that we can accept a condition that asks for some landscaping trees to be put on the west side, and to wrap the corners and put something, some architecture as suggested in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
If it becomes an issue at the next step, we may be coming back to ask for a plan revision. You know, and we hope not, but I would say, what I agree with you is that if people can really see it, we want it to look good. We really want, we found that the new building drives a lot of people that we usually have not had in the past as customers, because they feel more comfortable with it. And so it's important to us that people who see that building think that, wow, this is a step above what you see out there. So I would like to kind of do something in between, and if it causes us a problem, we'll come back. And to be honest, we'll talk, we're going to meet with staff in the CDA, and if it's a really important issue to them, you know, we'll put it on the table with that. I mean, we're not saying, just, it's all part of the same package.
Sure. So, Mr. Embert?
Dale,
Yes, sir.
you're talking about the wrapping. I get the wrap. They're wrapping the north end, so we're talking about wrapping the south end, very similar to the north end. But then in the middle, or would we just extend the split face block as something to ground it with masonry, which actually is the best place for you to spend your money, because then you don't have tin going to the ground, and the building lasts a heck of a lot longer. So like a wainscot of the split face block around with the brick wrapping the corner, and then heavy landscaping with something that's a conifer that's
Pine or spruce, something
Whatever.
larger that's gonna.
something that won't drop its leaves in the winter.
Can I assume that the metal you're talking about is beige? Or cream, or? I'm sorry?
Yeah, earth tone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be fine. I don't even know that I mean, you're right about the base, that would be nice bringing that across. I don't even know that that's.
Split face block is your cheapest masonry you can put up.
cheapest in cost.
That's what I
It's a
meant.
good
That's what I
product.
meant.
Yeah, no, I know.
I have no problem with it. I like it.
Yeah.
I told you, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sincere. I really like the architecture
Yeah,
you came up with this. And I
appreciate that.
agree with you that you're going to get a lot of people that want to come here because it looks like the place you want to do business. I think it's a good business plan on your part. But we also, for our design
absolutely.
district, I love seeing that architecture, the tower, the masonry. It fits right in with what we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to try it for it, it's okay. Move approval with conditions 1 through 9 as recommended by staff. Condition 10 that staff added, as she worded it. Condition 11 that a copy of the wetland delineation be provided to staff, so they have a record of it. Condition 12 that there is no vehicle sales or long-term vehicle storage allowed on the site. And condition 13 that we modify the west facade to include a wrap around the south end of the full masonry and then a wrap around the full west side of the split face block, and then additional landscaping with conifers with final approval by staff.
Is there a second?
Can I just, when you brought up the wetland thing, I emailed my civil engineer because I wanted to verify.
We need a second before you can discuss it.
Okay, sorry.
I'll second.
Thanks. Sorry.
I emailed our civil engineer to make sure I was correct on the wetland delineations. I didn't want to mislead anybody. His email back to me is we had a wetland delineator certified by the DNR on site, and he determined there's no wetlands on our site based on the amount of fill that was placed on it. So
Perfect. So if we
just
could
wanna
just,
make sure that,
that's,
because we did
that's,
not actually submit that we didn't actually do a wetland delineation, we just had a delineator.
but you had an assured delineator on site.
Yes.
Perfect. So if we could just get a copy of his email or note, that'd be perfect. So we have it for the file. So,
I just want to make sure it doesn't actually.
no,
be a
that's
full
fine.
blown-
Assured delineation is fine with the DNR too. That way, if the DNR comes back to you or us, we just have that thing to dangle in front of their face.
Not a problem.
Okay.
The rest of the motion, that one that we're all a little about, the last one on the facade, it's crafted so you don't have to come back here.
Yep.
And I'm sure the minutes will reflect that the preference would be full masonry on the back, and that can be forwarded to CDA, and that can be a conversation there. And that's something, certainly, if they want to put money into it, they can look at the architecture also. But what would allow is this base minimum that you could come back with. It's a bit of a compromise, wrap the south corner, the base, which I think is a better building for you. It's just maintenance, nothing's going to tear up that metal, and then the conifers so we can, I don't want to say hide it.
I
Or
understand.
certainly
No.
take the eye away from the parts that aren't as nice as the rest of it, so we can emphasize all the great architecture that you have there.
Oh, and we agree with all the comments. We want to put this building on there that will work for us and work for the city.
Sonia, did you have some other comments?
Question for Mr. Ganzer and/or an additional recommended condition. He asked about the color of the metal, and on the notes on the architecture, it just says architectural metal panel. And if the color being an earth tone is something that's important to the commission, I want to make sure that that's in there as well. Maybe submitting a plan showing the color to staff for final approval.
I think we do need that because
Is that a friendly,
sage is an earth tone.
It'll be
What would look
taupe is
horrible on
actually
this
the color we're
building?
planning on.
Oh, okay.
Taupe.
It's a tan. It's a light tan beige.
Can we just add that to the
is that a friendly
record then?
amendment? Okay, with the friendly amendment to the maker in the second?
That's fine.
Okay,
I have to say what the color was.
all right. So
Nope,
we'll
nope.
add that. So we've
Yeah.
added that as, that the color would be, is that
Put it all
condition
to rest.
14?
14.
Anything else? Okay, we will, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And one abstaining, we've got 4 ayes, is it? That works, all right,
I abstain.
Thank you,
Good luck.
guys.
Hope it
Appreciate
works.
it.
Nice, nice.
thank you. Congrats. Moving on to 5C, consideration of, no. Jake, we're gonna, oh, we can do 5C, right? We'll do 5C. Consideration of action on proposed solution to light glare at Oneida Park Shelter and discussion of future park shelter lighting, represented by Jake Anderson, Park and Recreation Director. Welcome.
No. It'll be fine.
Howdy, howdy. Let's take a vote on all these options for lights.
No, give us one.
That's why I did 5, because the one that I'll say you won't like. The challenge with replacing the existing lights at Oneida Park is that we used a smooth face block to mount these vertical style lights, and so that's approximately 16 inches wide. Many of the downlight, kind of half moon or full cutoff lights are at a standard 18-inch wide, and so that would require, it would look bad, number one. Number two, it would probably require some chiseling of some of the split face concrete. So our architect came up with option number 1 is probably our top choice, and after I have the other options, I would probably tend to agree. It's a more vertical, but still has just a straight downlight projection, which I think this commission was looking for. And so that's the FCC lighting, FCC 820, so it's an 8-inch round wall mount cylinder, aluminum cylinder. And it says up and down, but you can just have down. You won't have up as an option. There really won't be any need, I wouldn't think, on this building itself. So this would probably be the one that I would suggest, and it can be in the color bronze that, you know, matches our other lights that we have in our system. It'd have a very low, I think, distribution of light, and certainly won't be impacting the neighbors. No, first one on
It's labeled option 1.
Oh, okay.
Jake, will that provide you with the light? I mean, will it be functional for you?
Yeah, I mean, really, the wall packs on our shelters are more for security lighting. For our, police department, for neighbors to make sure that people aren't around the building that shouldn't be there at a certain time. And that's why they're on kind of to that dusk to dawn type of timer. The majority of the shelter use lighting is underneath the open air, shelter part of it. So I think as long as there's enough lighting where people can see going to the bathroom from the open air shelter, that's fine. We don't have bollards necessarily on the walk path from the shelter to the parking lot. So there's some dark spaces, and we have that at all of our facilities. So I'm fine with whatever option you guys want to do. I don't have the money to pay for it, but hopefully the council will find some money somewhere to pay for this retrofit.
Commission members, Mr. Kugel?
Jake, what was it? What's the wattage in the ones you have now out there?
They are like a 24 watt, I believe.
Oh, so you can match it up with another 24.
Yeah, I mean, it's right.
Okay.
Mr. Humber?
2 comments. First, with all due respect to the architect and the parks, when I drove around there isn't any shielded lighting anywhere in that neighborhood. They've all got glare. They're all pointing out towards the other neighbor. Now, having said that, we hold ourselves to a higher standard. We hold our businesses to a higher standard, so we do need to have shielded. But, I did drive around the neighborhood, and there's spotlights pointed at you and everything else. So if there was another home there, this wouldn't even be an issue because that home would be allowed to point it out. But since it's us in the parks, I think it's really important that we do have shielded lighting. And I think any of them are fine with me. I like the one you picked. That's fine. You might want to consider putting a bulb in going up to it. Might be some neat lighting you get inside that, because a lot of your lights are inside the roof line. You might get some nice up lighting that does some nice things to show off the shelter too. So it's just a thought. It's your business.
Sure. You can just take the top off, right?
Well, no, it'll go up or down, and you just don't put a bulb in going up, and you don't have to worry about it, but you can.
No.
And it might look nice with just some up lighting into that roof.
Especially on the
not the ends, but the ones that are underneath.
the
there might be
restroom,
really cool.
the restroom side that's got a higher peak with the cedar on it.
It might be real nice. Might just show it off a little bit.
Thank you.
The ones,
Rob?
the lights on the south side of the shelter actually, they have columns in front of all of those. It's only the 3 or 4 lights, the one on the east and the west, and then the ones on the north, which don't face any lots. But for consistency's sake, I guess.
Right, and
Placement of all is
I think of I've talked to 4 neighbors on the west side. They had no problems with the lights. The neighbors that had the problems were on the north side and the south side of where the taller columns were. And here, anyone from further down on the east side, because you've kind of got that big open field and houses there. But the people that lived in the west, continually, I asked them after initially hearing complaints about the lights. But they were blocked a little bit by the columns.
As far as the selection, I'm fine with it as long as you think that it's a pretty focused fixture. I think that's going to provide enough light. I think the aesthetics I like the best. That or 5 would be my other option if you're looking for a wider casting light. Definitely not 3. Looks like the Starship Enterprise.
Like Star Trek?
I do, but just not on our park shelters.
Yeah, I mean, I think option 1 is going to give us the architectural look of what the intent of the design of the shelters were. The full cutoff wall packs and LED kind of get a base standard, and then there's very few options and more of an architectural grade. I'm fine with the limited light. I still think there's enough off light from the underneath shelter area, and really it's just a matter of providing enough light near the bathroom so people can see to get in. And then just enough ambient light for our public safety to see from the road.
Mr. Homburg?
I think the bronze will actually be more attractive than that aluminum you got now, because it doesn't match a darn thing.
That was an error in
Okay, well, I just
the
looked at it. It doesn't
ordering
match
of it.
anything.
No, it doesn't. No,
Doesn't match
no,
anything.
it was supposed to be bronze, and actually they're
Your error or the contractor's error?
not mine. No, I don't know.
Okay, then they should
I think
replace them, they should be putting the bronze.
the bronze one. Yeah.
I'm not joking, Jake. We want our bronze lights, and by the way, we're gonna switch styles. They're perfect.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
We approve the, what do we call it, choice number 1? Option
Option
1.
one.
Option 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
Have a
for
good night.
revisiting this. We are going to, because we have some guests this evening, we are going to come back to 5D, and we're going to move to 6A, which is consideration of action on non-compliant site design at Qdoba 103 West Broadway, Suite A, regarding the drive-through menu board and adjacent structures. Steve, good evening.
Okay, I'm Steve Dorn. Ron Stokes is here. Also, Ron is actually with Qdoba, and thought it would be important that he was here as well tonight. We're here to talk about their drive-through structures, their menu ordering board, and their canopy that goes over it. When I first got this project approved, I didn't have any plans from Qdoba. We just got the building shell approved, and the way that I deliver space to these tenants is I deliver them space in what's called a cold dark shell on the inside. I don't do any of their interior work, and I don't do any of their exterior work. So any of their menu ordering boards or drive-through structures, anything like that, I have no idea what those look like during my building plan approval process, because they are responsible for plan permitting and for the cost of all that on their own. I don't get involved in that. So I thought that would be a good backdrop to explain why we're here right now. And that is, we had our plans approved and permitted. Qdoba did their interior plans, and on their plans, they included the menu board and the drive-through signage and structures and such. And I think they may have assumed that that was approved as part of their plan set. Well, it wasn't, because my approval was different from their internal plan approval, okay? So why are we here? We're here because during Qdoba's build-out, they had constructed their, am I supposed to put that right there?
Yeah, they have to switch it back to the overhead. If they could switch it back to the overhead.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome, thank you.
No, I think that's fine. So during their construction process, their contractor installed a menu board. They're ordering canopy, which is a canopy that covers the cars when they're ordering food. And then behind that is a clearance bar, so cars don't crash into the ordering board or the building as they're coming along through the drive-through. I got a frantic call 2 weeks ago from Ron and Sonia that, hey, we can't get our occupancy permit because we have these drive-through structures that are not approved. And so I was able to work with Jim and Sonia and escrow some money with my own to the city of Monona until we could come in tonight and talk about a solution for the problem that exists. That money would be more than enough to cover removal of these if for some reason this was not approved tonight. What we would like to do is talk about what would be acceptable for screening these and leaving them in their place. One of the things I did in the past couple of days is I took a drive around Monona to look at what are other people doing that have drive-throughs and what can we do to come up with a solution that has been acceptable on previous buildings. So the closest two drive-throughs are the Taco Bell and the McDonald's on Broadway. And what I noticed was on like the McDonald's has a double drive-through actually, but what I noticed is they all have clearance bars, they all have canopies, and they all have menu ordering boards. In the case of McDonald's and Taco Bell, the actual screen and the structures are all visible from the main arterials. What's not visible is the back of the menu board, because in the case of McDonald's, the first one they were able to shove up against the building. The second one, the actual back of it is visible from Broadway because there's nothing to screen it. But in the case of Taco Bell, a similar situation. They've got a canopy that extends over the car, so when people are ordering food, they don't get wet. They have a menu board here that's tucked back into some shrubbery, and then they have a clearance bar like that. So as people come around the loop, they find out if their cars are big enough and they don't crash down the building. What Ron and I have talked about for our situation, if it's acceptable, is to landscape this whole back side of these two structures with, to use your term, coniferous trees that will not shake leaves in the winter, so that they are never visible from cars or pedestrians traveling up and down Broadway. We didn't put any landscape plans together because I wanted to talk through this and see if that was even a plausible idea. But that is really what our goal is tonight, is to see if we can get approval to leave the structures in place as they are per Qdoba's plans, and we will screen them with landscaping so that you can't see them.
Thank you. See if you want to hang there, and commission members? Bill?
I think after the fact that would be fine. Sonata did it to arborvitae wall. I beg you, not an arborvitae wall. It's the first thing everybody puts up to screen things is, 6 arborvitaes in a straight line. You gotta have a menu board. You can appreciate our frustration with it not being there, and even compared to, those are good comparisons you're showing with McDonald's and Taco Bell and stuff, but as you can see, even in this photograph, we're talking about 4 feet off of the sidewalk, and it's just like really in our face. But after the fact, it seems to me it's some nice landscaping, as far as I'm concerned, would probably be acceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Humbert?
I think you need to paint them too. I think, you've got your black light poles, you've got your
Sure.
black fences around all the patios. We did black up and down Monona Drive. You've got a black base and then just this big silver glob.
Sure.
And the same thing on your canopy. A silver's your color, but the posts going up, the stuff that's eye level, because we've even talked about down the road, we've got that one stainless steel transformer that MGE put in that we want to paint, because everything else there is, you've done it, we've done it with black fixtures, and I think that helps take your eye away from it. I agree with Dale. And I think just a solid wall of landscaping to hide it will just look silly, but I think if they're black, like everything else around there is,
That's a good idea.
it really takes your eye away from it.
your eye away,
And then you can put some landscaping in there that, again, takes your eye away. You'll be able to see through and see black, but it won't be so obvious. It'll be like it was meant with that big silver thing. And then it's some sloppy work. Strip the sonotubes, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
and, I mean,
That's a given.
the bar that's there is hanging crooked. It just all looks like nobody cares. And
Yep.
then even when you look at the front of the building, there's a couple bollards that were poured, and right now they're primer with concrete slopped on them. I mean,
Yep.
that affects the aesthetics a little.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, we still have to go through our punch list with
Yeah.
the GC, so yeah, no, definitely.
But definitely strip the sonotube.
No question.
That's part of what makes it look bad, sonotube, with
Yeah.
whoever's advertising. I think it was Feral Equipment's advertising on it.
Yeah, definitely.
But to me, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but we use black in all our furniture, our light poles. You used it all the way around there. I think that would make it look like it was planned and fit in there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Rob, did you?
I would agree. Edging was the other thing. You want to put edging in as part of this landscaping. Otherwise, you're going to have that kind of sloppy edge between turf and landscape group.
Okay.
So, however that wraps in, and then I would agree with the landscaping. It doesn't have to be a complete screen.
Right.
A more
Yeah, but just so it's not
an
in your face,
arrangement
yeah, yep.
would be.
Let me ask you, Rob, if it's not an arborvitae, if it were like a crabapple, something, I understand that it'll be bare, but still that behind black, the dormant tree is going to do some screening too.
Yeah, well, it could be a low ornamental shrub like a tiger eye sumac is something that has beautiful fall color. Well, you got room. A tiger eye is a dwarf sumac. I think if you do like an Iowa juniper or something like that, it has a more open structure, has a little more architecture to its form. And then with complementary perennials around it, grasses and
Sure.
flowering shrubs and things like that. So, I mean, I think you could get away with one conifer and then complementary low shrubs or dwarf shrubs and
Good idea.
Mr. Kugel?
We would probably have the same discussion 6 months ago.
Right.
We would have been going through the same thing.
Sure.
And we would have, I'm no doubt in my mind, we'd approve the menu board. It just kind of seems like it's kind of slipped through between two sets of plans. So I'm fine. I think the idea of painting it black, adding some landscaping around there. The building looks nice. I mean, the final product out there, to me, I'm happy the way it turned out. I know there was a lot of, people, I heard from a lot of people about the trees coming down, but now that it's up, I've also heard from the same people saying, it doesn't look too bad. It's pretty nice
Great.
addition to Broadway, so.
Great.
I have no problem. I think the black is a good idea, and I agree to have some landscaping out there, but you don't need a complete wall of landscaping.
Sir,
Steve, is Mr. Bruce going on that sign as well?
Underneath Qdoba?
Yeah.
Yeah, yep, they just decided they wanted to use a different sign vendor, so.
Is there a motion? Mr. Umber?
Can I ask a question? Is our resident landscape experts, Mr. Gans or Mr. Stein, are you comfortable with staff approval on landscaping, or would you like to see it come back?
Approval is fine as far as I'm concerned.
yeah. I think
Are you
that's-
comfortable with that, Sonia? Okay,
Can you, if you wanted to run it by me,
that'd be
Yeah.
great.
that'd be great.
I'll have an landscape architect put together a plan, and we'll spend some time on it and make
Okay.
sure it's good.
And if you're going to add edging, just so to be clear, I think you'd be wise to do it from the foundation sign all the way to the building. And I didn't look on the west side of the building, but if it's the same sort of situation with landscape bed going into turf, and if there's not any edging,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a vinyl edging, just even a shovel cut edge, something.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. We'll look at it, and if,
Especially on the Broadway
yep,
definitely. I'll look at it, and if it's not on the west side, we'll do it there too.
Steve, what else do you think we can get you to do?
Better call it quits.
I think I'd like to see a different roof color on there, maybe, if you wouldn't mind reshingling it and then let you know.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move approval, or not approval, I move that we add a condition to the original approval for this site that the drive-through structures are black and a landscape plan addressing the comments made tonight be submitted to staff for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none?
Yep.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. You guys have a great night.
Okay, we will move back to item 5D, discussion on revision of sign code ordinance, Article L of the Monona Municipal Zoning Code. Sonia.
Alrighty. I handed out a sheet with some slides on it, not for something that you should know, but to help guide our discussion. I'm not sure how much detail we'll get into on the legal issue with Reed versus Gilbert. I just want to do a general overview of it, see if you guys were able to go through the materials that I shared previously. And any of the detailed information should, of course, be left to the city attorney after we get the bones of the revised sign code in place. I'll ship it off to the city attorney at that time to go into more detail on what falls under Reed versus Gilbert and what doesn't. So, I don't know, Jim, does that sound good to you? Start with just a general overview of...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Maybe a couple examples of, when I looked at, I was telling Sonia that she had a link and I was a little confused. I looked at these two signs and I thought, what's wrong with this? But maybe you can explain what was wrong with them.
It's Reed versus Gilbert's a U.S. Supreme Court case that was decided earlier this summer related to First Amendment, freedom of speech rights, and how that relates to regulating the content of signage. So what Reed versus Gilbert says is that if the sign regulation is content-based, then it's subject to strict scrutiny, which means the law must be necessary to further a compelling governmental interest, and that law must be narrowly tailored to achieve it. So if something, to decide if something is content neutral, Reed versus Gilbert also adopted the rigid test to determine if that regulation is content neutral. The rigid test basically establishes that if you need to read the sign in order to apply the particular regulation to it, then it's content-based and the strict scrutiny rule then applies. So I took some screenshots of some signs there. The Leslie Nope for City Council would fall under a political or campaign sign. The one above it is a garage sale sign. The next one, a public message. The next one, real estate. The next one, celebratory banner or team sign or something like that. So if you have different regulations in the side code for a yard sale sign, campaign sign, real estate, et cetera, and they have different size regulations, and you need to read the sign to be able to determine which regulation applies, and that's content-based. And it's something that Reed versus Gilbert is prohibiting, essentially. So there's a little bit of background on the case itself, where the same issue was brought up in town of Gilbert, Arizona. They had three different categories: temporary, directional, political, and ideological. And same instance that I just described, where they regulated a sign based on different standards for each of those categories. So the last slide on page 1 says majority opinion. The town regulations were content-based because they focused on the message, which triggered different regulations for each category. Because it was content-based, strict scrutiny applied, and that's presumptively unconstitutional unless it's narrowly tailored to serve compelling state interests. So then, getting into how that relates to our sign code, when revising the code, you should ask, does this regulation apply to a sign because of the content of the sign? If you have to read the message, which is that rigid test, to figure out how a sign is to be regulated, then it is content-based, and it could be subject to challenge under this case, Reed versus Gilbert. In the draft sign code that I put together, I color-coded some things, and anything that's highlighted yellow is something that I thought could possibly fall under this Reed versus Gilbert category and something to discuss with you all and with the city attorney. Examples of different categories could be the auxiliary, commercial message, construction sign, different types of flags, garage sale, non-commercial, free speech symbols or insignia, political or campaign signs, real estate signs, etc.
Thank you. Has the city attorney reviewed this yet?
He hasn't yet. I thought it might be a good idea to get the general consensus of not only this Reed versus Gilbert issue, but the other things that we're talking about so that we could present a slightly more finished draft to him to review.
Okay. Commission members? Mr. Humberg.
Well, I actually was in a couple meetings with Tom Hubble over at Fitchburg, and he's a long-term planner there. I asked him what they were planning on doing, and he said, well, I can't remember the municipality, but it was some other municipality around here. He said, they have the same attorney we do, so I'm going to wait for them to spend the money on the attorney, then I'm going to see what they did, and then we're going to craft it. So my thought is, I sure would like a few other communities to take a shot at this and try to weed it out before we try to figure it all out and be the first one. I'm thinking we have to keep it in mind for our sign code. We need to recodify our sign code. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's going to be delayed just a little bit because of this. And we can get a good draft on what we want, but why do we want to be the first one to try to figure it all out? And that's pretty much the message I got from him is, well, you let me know what you're going to do because we'd sure love to hear what you're going to do. Nobody's sure how this affects them. And it seems we should let a few other people wade through all the legalities before we try it.
That's always a good idea. Seriously. Sonia, I'm confused. So what did Gilbert, I mean, they didn't meet the sign code. They were in violation of the sign code, but why?
Well, the Supreme Court decided that, well, the town cited the church for placing signs around town. I think they were placed in the right-of-way, and they were regulating it based on the special event that was in there and the fact that it was a church's message and all these different things that are content-based regulations. So what Reed upheld was that that did not meet the strict scrutiny test, and that I don't know the details about, and I can't really speak to that.
So basically, somebody could put a political campaign sign out, but they weren't going to allow the church to put out their message for their event, and that was biased because of the content.
Did you?
No, I mean, that was what it was. That I think in the context of the case, I haven't read it, but other than the summaries of it, but that if the sign would have been permitted under certain circumstances, depending on the content, but they arbitrarily said this one wouldn't comply. It still seems to me that sometimes if you have like for example, a directional sign, that's a little different matter than if you've got a political campaign sign or, some of those other things. So I agree. I think it would be a great idea to let some of the other municipalities take a whack at it and see where they go with it. There may even be some further litigation there.
So is the problem that it was religious, or that they were putting 20 signs up around the community? I mean, I still don't understand what the problem was.
Well, I think they prohibited certain signs. They permitted certain signs with political. I don't know what they permitted, political messages or whatever. But they said that these religious signs telling the time of services didn't come within their agreed messages.
So they didn't really have to say that it was because it was religious or anything?
No. Yeah, no, it wasn't.
This is just what we allow, and these don't fit.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
The court said that they didn't allow it because of the content. But it didn't matter that it was religious content. It was covered by freedom of speech. It could have been political advertisements for a political meeting or whatever, but they couldn't regulate the sign based on the content. But I say,
Fascinating. I consider a political sign considerably more offensive than someone telling me what time their service is.
Well, they may have prohibited the political sign too, but they did there was a provision of they permitted some kinds of signs
Yeah.
in this particular area. And in order to determine whether or not the sign qualified, you had to go and look at the content. That's what the court says. You can't do that.
So one example of whether or not we hire an attorney to work on it right now or not would be if you have a residential lot and you have a category that allows temporary yard signs. That yard sign category could continue to regulate things like quantity, size, location, number on the lot, duration, and that sort of thing. But you wouldn't be able to look at that temporary yard sign and say, is this a political sign and therefore it can only be 16 square feet, or is this a real estate sign and therefore it can only be 15 square feet? So that was one of the recommendations out of a conference that I went to, is limiting the number of categories and reducing it to something more simple.
What's timing from your perspective as far as our sign code and incorporating some of these changes?
I think there is a good amount of work in this that we still could review that is not directly related to the Reed versus Gilbert. So if
Do
we
you want to walk through the areas and then
Sure.
we should have discussion on them?
So kind of going hand in hand, the memo that went with this has some bullet points of the things that we discussed back in October. And in the actual draft, I tried to take some of that discussion and put it into the code format. So anything that's in red is a new addition. Added a little bit of beef to the purpose statement on page 1 in the red text, and a lot of definitions were added. These are things that I've taken notes on in the sign code since I've started. Some of them I felt should be in there from the beginning, and some of them I added after reviewing other sign codes and finding things that might be beneficial. For example, a definition of building facade is really helpful when you're actually talking about how to measure a building facade in order to calculate how much sign area is permitted based on the standards we have.
You've got number 4, auxiliary sign in yellow. Why?
So auxiliary sign is in yellow because I thought it's one thing that we might want to look a little bit more in the Reed versus Gilbert. If you needed to read it to determine what it was. That one is not as solid as some of the other ones. That would definitely fall under Reed versus Gilbert.
Anything you have marked in yellow makes you think of Reed versus Gilbert, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the blue is?
The blue is something that I wanted to discuss more with the Plan Commission. So for alteration, for example, I added the definition for alteration. That's why it's in red. And then I have it coded in blue because it says an alteration is defined as a change in the size or shape of an existing sign. Changing or replacing a sign face or panel is not an alteration unless the alteration affects a condition imposed by the Plan Commission or an approved comprehensive signage plan for the building or site. So it's in blue because I thought, well, that might be a little weak. It could be cleaned up a little bit and get your input on it because there have been a lot of applicants that come in to just reface a sign and it ends up being the same color. There are other applicants that come in and reface a landscape ground sign or a cabinet wall sign, and they end up tweaking the content that's on it, whether that be the name of the business or a logo that's added to it. So the question is what is an alteration? Is it a change in size or shape, or is it any alteration requires a sign permit?
Jim?
Go ahead.
3 comments. First, I want to say, overall, I think you did a fantastic job getting this started. This is really nice. This is what we've been begging for over years. So I didn't want you to think my comments, well, it's just ditch it to the side. That's not my comment. My comment really pertained to the legal implications of it. I think you've clearly written it with that case in mind, and we're no legal experts here other than perhaps Griff, so we can't really comment. I mean, we can do our best, but it still has to be reviewed. But I'm just thinking we kind of maybe slow down the review. All this stuff is really necessary. Yeah. Second comment was on the alteration you're talking about. I think a change in the size, shape, or height of an existing sign. Height would certainly be good in there because that could be changed. And then thirdly, I think it brings up a good point about what we can and can't do on that sign is we do regulate what they can put up there. We don't want telephone numbers, we don't want web addresses, and we feel it's a safety hazard for people to have to slow down driving down a road to get some advertising like that. We feel it's an identification sign for the business. That's something we need clarification on now, because can we still have that parameter? So when we talk about an alteration, certainly in the past, if somebody changed it from their business name to their business name, hours of operation, phone number, today's special and all that clearly wouldn't work with our sign ordinance. We have to find out what does work and what we can regulate.
Okay.
So that was like 3 comments on the
Yeah.
same, well, 1
And that's
overall
why
and
it's
2 on that. Pardon?
And that's why it's color coded.
But it's a hard question. I think there still has to be a legal way for us to regulate how much information's on that sign, because I think it becomes a safety hazard. We always have, I think we always will. There's a limit, and there's a purpose for that sign, which is to identify a business. But we need, I suspect on that, we need legal input.
Reed versus Gilbert, so, the best burger in town, those sorts of things. Is that content? Is that something that we typically have not allowed those sorts of items on a sign?
If it furthers a compelling governmental interest, and one of those things is safety and one of those things is aesthetics, when you get any more into details beyond that and the legality, I don't know specifics, but those are legitimate government interests, and if it relates to your purpose statement.
Right, so where does safety and aesthetics take us?
There's also some delineation between commercial and non-commercial free speech that I also can't get into, and I don't know, Chris's point is good. Let's not try to drill down too much into the details of the legal issues at this point, just because we can't answer them. But
You have to understand, this is a work project act for lawyers. And there will be tons of litigation coming out of this case.
Are you kidding? My goodness.
And a lot of that litigation will probably start to define how this case is to be interpreted. That people will bring up. Municipalities will argue that, for instance, a directional sign has a different purpose. They'll argue that the aesthetics and the are an important attribute of it. They'll talk about the right of the community, and of course we'll have to resolve all of that with different sign ordinances in the context of this case. So a year from now, we probably will have a much better idea, because a lot of people will have already litigated these various subjects. But right now, it's anybody's guess.
So,
If you want my opinion, you have to tell me what side you want to argue.
so moving forward with this document, is there anything, can we adopt anything? Can we move forward on some of this stuff? And is that what we want to do? And then do we regulate our sign ordinance as it has been?
I guess my opinion would be this whole Reed Gilbert thing. If we just got to, if that hadn't come along, we would have had to clean up our sign ordinance. So if we were to focus on that, kind of write out, like people are saying, let this whole fallout from Reed Gilbert sort of take shape and come back and revisit it in the future. But I do think there's some things in here that we need to clean up, so that people who are trying to craft a sign for whatever are that it's clear to them what the city will allow. So on definitions, is there anything with that in mind? And if I'm wrong, is everybody okay with that way to approach it? Dennis?
Well, I too want to say that this is really helpful. It's like a colored track change document, so it's easy to follow. But just when we have the definitions going down the sign here, just for an example, attention attracting sign. So you're saying create the standards to put in the table.
Right,
Okay, when you say create standards, that's the standard for the table.
correct.
But right now in Monona, there are no Are there any sign requirements or sign standards for single-family homes? Yeah, and I see you have it noted in there on one of the pages. Where should single-family sign standards be located? I guess that begs the question, do we need single-family sign standards?
Yes.
We need single-family?
I think
Deal with
so.
them, Sonia, so what?
Yeah, and the reason I put that in there is because with the two tables that we have in our existing code, it's not clear where the single-family sign code standards are located. and
Are there any single-family sign codes?
There should be, because we're regulating things like temporary yard signs and.
But currently, there aren't any.
Well, there is kind of by default. I know somewhere in our code we regulate businesses in a home. We don't allow advertising for that business if you have a home business. So we're regulating it, but we don't really have a section dedicated to it.
It needs to be clarified.
And if you
Oh,
do
yeah.
want to allow a home business sign, what you'll allow, but a lot of people don't like to see them in a single-family neighborhood. I think it's a good point for discussion.
And that's why I ask. But to me, it's like, when I'm reading here on political signs or campaign signs as it's written now, you can't have a sign on behalf of a candidate shall not be erected not earlier than 30 days prior to the primary election. That's never going to work in Monona, in a single-family neighborhood, because already there's rough spine signs up a year and a half before an election. So I think we should just stay away from that one.
Well, I think it's still important. We need to talk about signs. You don't want somebody putting a 4x8 sheet of plywood in their front yard for a political candidate, so it goes back to size and duration. You don't want a 4x8 real estate sign in somebody's front yard. So I think we need sign.
But we don't have any currently, right?
Well, I think we do, but it's just not really quantified well in this particular area. I think what Sonia's trying to do is, let's say, we've got all these different sign districts, let's have a district just for single family. So if you're looking at what can I do at my home, there's a place you can turn to instead of reading the entire sign code.
And that's why I'm saying there isn't anything right now.
Not a specific section.
No,
correct.
okay.
I mean, there are temporary real estate open signs, but it's not in a, okay. So, again, back to 13.1.221. What, if any, changes would be, or how do we want to do this tonight? Do we want to go through line by line on each one of these?
Page by page?
Yeah, page by page. Dennis?
I'll just ask one last question then, is under definitions, when you, I'm going to assume, or I'm going to think that you probably took these definitions out of another sign code, the new ones. Awning, building facade, canopy, I mean,
It's a model United States sign code.
okay,
model.
good, that's fine. So it's not something you sat and
Right.
thought about, you went digging, and these are, what I would say is,
Industry standards?
yes, industry
There are
standards,
some
accepted
things, yeah, that might-
definitions, okay.
So attention attracting, I added that as a new definition. The reason I added it is because in our current code, one of the prohibited signs is flashing or moving signs, but it was not always clear to me if that just meant, say, a revolving sign, or if that meant an inflatable object in a yard on a business property. So I added that, and then create standards as a discussion point maybe later on.
Okay. Anything else on this page? If not, let's move to the next. Canopy, we're still under definitions, right?
Awning and canopy had regulations in the existing sign code, but they weren't defined anywhere,
Okay.
so I added those.
So commercial message would be in a district.
This commercial message, as it's defined, applies to any sign. And this builds off the discussion that we had at the last meeting where we were talking about taglines and extraneous information on a business identification sign, like a wall sign for a business, not wanting to allow an advertisement or a sale of a commodity or contact information, but just a business identification or a second line that furthers that identification.
But that falls in content, so it's subject to the case. So-
Further legal review necessary. Yep.
Okay, so anything more, definitions continue on the next page?
Can I ask on this page we're on?
Yes.
Flag poles. We're doing a definition here, but then it seems to me we're putting a regulation there. It says, or one free speech flag or insignia. Shouldn't we just be defining it here and then say what might or might not be allowed later on?
We can do that, yes.
Well, because it seems like, if I read this, I'm thinking, okay, now I can have these flag poles, a U.S. flag, Wisconsin, Monona, or one free speech, and that's something we should talk about later, but a flagpole should just be defined.
Okay.
What the flagpole is, and we talk about what's allowed in the table. Don't you agree?
Yes, I would agree, and there are other ones then that we should also clean up.
Yeah.
Sonia?
Yes.
17 is, in the definitions, is a little bit odd, because obviously I understand what you're trying to say, except that isn't the definition of a double-sided sign.
Exactly.
Oh,
Same thing.
right.
Right.
That's not a definition. Okay.
It's the opposite.
Yes. That will go into the standards section instead.
So,
Thank you.
I wanted to point out number 12, I added a definition for comprehensive signage plan.
yeah.
And this is one where I'm trying to translate our conversation from last time into the actual code where we talked about wanting to regulate the size and type and materials of signs on a comprehensive signage plan, but not necessarily colors. So one way that we could do that is to add on to the definition, adopted as part of the sign code, which regulates type, size, and materials of signs on the building
For that particular site.
for any comprehensive signage plan.
I question why we would want to limit what we're going to regulate in a definition. There might be a case where something comes up and we want to talk about colors and regulate colors. And I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but why would we limit it in the definition? Comprehensive sign plan is a complete signage plan. Now, what's approved could be talked about later, it can be talked about during the discussion, the approval of comprehensive signage plan.
I'm fine with that. I was building on the conversation where I thought there was a general consensus of the Plan Commission that moving forward, the policy would be not to regulate colors.
But this is a definition, this isn't policy.
Okay.
So the policy should go someplace else. Just the definition here, the policy someplace else.
Also, and I think this is what you're speaking to, Chris, actually, I don't think it should say anywhere in here that we're not going to
Look at
regulate
colors.
color.
I agree.
I mean, that's, we're open to consider, various colors on a project and so on, but I don't think that should be stated. That could definitely come back and
Yeah.
work against us.
Even back up on canopy, we define canopy, but then we're back in a policy, a canopy may be attached to a building freestanding for open sides as an accessory to a principal building. Is that the definition of canopy, or is that a policy that we should add someplace else?
That, I think, defines canopy.
I would agree.
So I guess the takeaway from here is just make sure that under definitions, it's just truly definitions. We go back through and then anything where we've added policy, that gets added to the chart, probably. Okay.
Could I make one comment on that? Then I think, but on number 10, I like where it says, shall all be one color, because there's no case where if we did approve a changeable copy or manual changeable reader board, there's no case where we let them have multiple colors in there.
I understand, but that's not the definition. Now could be.
The definition of what we would consider a changeable copy or what we'd accept as one.
Yeah. Our definition.
There's a lot of gray areas, aren't there?
Go to 23 to 36. Wow, all these in yellow might get thrown out, huh? Maybe.
Or still regulated in a more organized, new definition.
Can I make a suggestion for 28? That we don't just make it quite so easy. We talked about that in cases allowed to go 6 feet, but let's not just say it's 6 feet. Just maybe say, Plan Commission may allow a sign up to 6 feet with these specific conditions, but not just say automatically you have it, because there might be a lot of cases where we feel that sign's just too big for the property, or too big for what's around it.
That would go in a different section though.
Okay,
Not-
but then the whole thing should be stricken from here. But
Perhaps.
it's a
And
hard
our-
thing, because our definition we talked about is, we like the 5 feet, well, let somebody go to 6 feet with certain conditions. But I'd rather say we may, not that we have to.
No, there's got to be some, one of the things I'm struggling with on all the definitions is when we get beyond a definition, and I think that kind of keeps going back and forth. I mean, we go from, landscape ground sign is freestanding sign that designates a project, business, or building.
Period.
That's
Okay.
the end of it. That's the end of the definition of a ground sign.
No.
Now you're starting to go into the code.
No, I still think you gotta keep, is designed and materials complementary to and harmonious with the building and site, and is closely integrated with the site landscaping, which is clustered around the base of the sign. I think that's all part of the definition of a sign for us.
It's our Monona definition.
Yeah.
It's not a universal definition.
And the height.
I agree with get rid of the numbers and stuff, Dale, and put them somewhere else,
Yeah.
but I think for us, a landscape grounds, I mean, you have to define a landscape ground sign, needs that landscaping, it needs to have landscaping cluster, and we require a landscape ground sign to be harmonious with the building architecture. I mean, for us,
Okay.
that's a requirement.
Okay, I can buy that, but I want to disagree with you on not saying it's 6 feet high. I mean, either ground signs can be 6 feet high or they can't, but when someone starts the design process and goes to your code, there needs to be some kind of structure to start with, and not,
If we tell
okay, we have no rules here, they can say anything they want, and one doesn't know how to start a drawing, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I mean, there needs to be some place to start, and so I think that height is important to have in there.
But later on in the chart, we talk about
Yeah.
maximum of 5 feet high with 1 foot of non-message base, or allowance to reach 6 foot high with at least 2 feet of non-message base. So there is
Yeah,
the
okay.
detail that you're
Right,
looking for.
Okay, right,
So
right.
if we take it out of here, at least it's covered in the chart.
But keep in
It's either or.
harmonious with building
want-
materials
Sure.
and landscaping and all that.
All that could be, incorporated here. Okay. Anything else on 23 to 36?
Yeah, 31 that sign in the second sentence probably should be business. Signs which advertise goods, products, or services on a different location from where the business is located, or
Yeah.
or if it's not for a business, if it's off-premise, but from where the business, or could a residence have that? Off-premises sign? Probably not, but I'm saying business, is there a better word than business? Maybe different location from where the
Business or commodities.
business or owner, I guess business is the best one for now, we know what we mean, but.
Do we have anything to add to menu signs after tonight?
Yeah, do we? Menu sign.
Well, why are we saying of any material measuring no less than a third of the greatest width of the sign at any point?
Is that like the posts?
The post has to be substantial, which this one wasn't. This one wasn't a third of the width of the sign. That's just the aesthetic requirement, which we just let go. I don't disagree with it, but we just let
Does
this
this one need a definition? We didn't have menu sign definition before, so I added this and I took
Okay.
it straight from the United States sign.
Really? It seems they could do better on menu sign,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Could be a better definition for it.
I think you're right, Sonia, the definition should be in there, the post being no less than a third of the width of the sign is kind of odd.
It's an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, and this is going to be a lot easier to hide. These are going to be a lot easier to hide the way it is than if there was a third of it was, the base was a third of the width of the sign.
Yeah.
I would question
Find a better
that.
definition.
Further comments on 23 to 36?
I have 31 highlighted in blue, partly because our current sign code in the table does allow for off-premise advertising signs to be approved by the Plan Commission, but I questioned in what case would we ever allow that?
I saw this definition as something that we can put in our table that they're not allowed.
Okay.
But you still have to say what you're not allowing.
Right. Okay.
So either way, whatever we end up deciding, it needs to have a definition of what we're talking about. So I think it's good to have the definition.
Okay.
We can arm wrestle when we get to the allowables.
Okay, and then just to note too, that when we discuss what's prohibited and not, an off-premise advertising sign can be wayfinding, and that's why at the end I put C wayfinding, but we'll probably want to differentiate between those two.
Clearly.
Okay.
So you've got off-premise advertising signs, and on 33, you've got permitted off-premise
right.
signs. Why would we have both of those? Yeah, 33, I think, comes out.
Or we prohibit.
Well, it's not advertising, though.
Yeah, the
31
top
is
one's
advertising, and 33 talks about really wayfinding. Doesn't it? Signs which direct motorists. That's not advertising so much as wayfinding.
All right, I'll buy that.
But then I would say, get rid of the C wayfinding behind off-premise advertising, because that's
Or-
not wayfinding.
Or does wayfinding
But it has its own
replace
def-
33?
Well, maybe it does. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But then get rid of C wayfinding behind 31.
What are you saying, you're going to get rid of 33 altogether?
Or 33 altogether, because
We added
wayfinding replaces
under
it.
45.
Yeah.
That makes it clearer.
34 will probably get axed by somebody when the time comes. 37 to 47?
I have a question. I'll start right out with 37. I know what you're trying to do. You show the real estate signs, you say not to exceed 1 year, and then what? Take it down for a day, and then you got a year to start again?
Right.
I don't know how we do that. Do you just cover it up with a blanket for a week and then open it up again? I don't know how we're going to stop that. And I don't know how we stop somebody from advertising that they've got a building for, and I know your problem is the building doesn't lease, the sign stays there forever. But I don't know, when we add not to exceed 1 year, what's the time period then before they can,
Put it back
I
up.
mean, they might lose a tenant the next day. And then should we even be able to tell them that they can't advertise, or the tenant or that building for sale? That's a hard one for me.
It's really a hard one, and kind of unenforceable. I mean, I think if there is a space for lease or something for sale, you can have a sign up no matter how long it takes. I think where the problem comes in is in a lot of multi-tenant buildings, they permanently have the information. They could be 100% full, and they still want that information out there because,
On a list.
you know, someone calls and, yeah, what are you looking for? And 4 months, we have something coming up. And
This one, go ahead.
It seems almost like it needs to be allowed if there's leasable space. I feel like time would be better spent looking for a way to regulate size, and so it's not a big monstrosity, which we talked about at the last meeting. How we don't want a 4x8 sheet of plywood up there forever, so if we can regulate size, then at least that's kind of the lesser of two evils, I feel like.
Jim?
Sir, go ahead.
I kind of agree, but then, you know, going back to our premise, we shouldn't even be talking about it not to exceed a year. Here, it should be under the definition in the table. This is the definition of what it is, then in the table we'll talk about what size it is and how long it's allowed. It's just going to be really hard to tell somebody that they're going to take it down when they have an empty building, or sometimes buildings take a couple years to sell. And it's going to be really hard to tell someone that they can't try to sell that building.
Do we want to?
Right.
I don't want to.
I don't think I do.
If a building's for sale, I think
So
they should be able
I
to.
agree with what you put on it. Well, let's look at the size and the quality of the sign. It starts looking ratty, they got to fix it or something like that.
Okay, what about if I'm selling my home, I put a little sign in the yard? One of those little, does it fall under this category?
Well, it's a real estate sign, but we're going to have a residential section, and then we're going to have a business section.
Got it, all right.
So we'll talk about the sizes, et cetera. It'd probably be a little bigger in a business district than it would be on a residential, on a single-family residential. And a multifamily residential might be bigger than a single-family residential. That would go to Sonia's point of having a different section for different types of properties. That would make some sense.
Which is in the tables now.
Hopefully.
For real estate, it
We'll have
is right
even
now.
better tables.
Yeah, our tables, they have specific square feet in commercial space in Broadway, Gateway District, and for multifamily properties.
Other items 37 to 47.
46. Sign affixed to the surface of window. Can we just end it there? Because the one I had an issue with was when that whole center or whatever, AT&T, they could put up all kinds of banners and signs they have on the inside of the building so it's readable from the inside. It's nothing but white paper on the outside. But if we look at a building and we put it in and we want to have windows, we want to have certain architecture, and they just plaster every window so all we can see is white paper, I think that's a very unattractive look, and it's not what we intended when we approved that building. So to say that just if the message can be seen from the outside, I think is limiting. I think a window sign is a window sign. It's affixed to the surface of a window. Because later on we define how much that window can be covered with signs. And to say that example, you could have nothing but signs on the whole interior of the business. They don't want any windows, and I think it changes the aesthetic of that building.
Anything else on 37 to 47?
Yes. Oh, no, it's on the bottom of the page.
Let's
Sorry.
go to prohibited signs.
Yeah, we've had in our code forever, but we have some floodlighted signs, and they work. Some of them work really well, where they've got a sign out there like the kind Dale makes, and they might just have a little floodlight going up there and washing it at night, and they're very attractive. So I'm not sure. We've always had in our code that they're prohibited. I understand that, but I'm not sure we've followed through with that, and I'm not sure if we should. I know what we don't want.
You can't have that in there. I mean, you're saying all signs have to be internally illuminated.
It doesn't say it, but it says you can't have a floodlight on. That would eliminate a lot of things. I think what we always
could argue that maybe half of the signs in Monona are lit externally.
A lot of them are.
Yeah.
So get rid of it.
Well, I think what we were trying to regulate way back when was the glare, to have a spotlight that's sitting there looking right at a driver. And that's something we have to look at each and every sign, how it's lit. But we have signs that are lit a lot of different ways externally. One I think of is like Ken's, where he has those really old shepherd's crook kind of lights that go right back down and light, and could be considered a floodlight. We allow it. So I know that's not something you did. You took it from the old code, but I think it's something
that should be gone.
Be thinking about if that's truly what we want.
Other comments on prohibited signs?
I have two questions on definitions before we go past that. To clarify what Chris was saying about window signs, if you remove that latter portion with its message intended to be visible to the exterior environment, then you can have signs that do face the inside with their back end, the white facing. And is that a less attractive
No.
outcome than a sign visible to the exterior environment posted on a window.
But that's not a definition, that we should talk about that.
Okay,
If they
so
do
you
have a
might-
window sign, it needs to be viewable from the exterior, but I think a sign affixed to a window is a window sign. And then we can talk about it in your chart of what's allowable and what's not.
Okay.
And I agree that it's very unattractive, it shouldn't even be allowed.
Gotcha. And then my other question on a definition was number 27. I thought graphic sign could use a little bit more attention.
Are we allowed to go back a page?
Yes. So graphic sign is one of those ones that could be under Reed versus Gilbert, but I've not really ever been sure at how to interpret it.
I'm not sure what a graphic sign is.
Right.
Could we-
So 3 examples that I could think of in town now. One, there's a dance studio with a giant mural painted on it.
Which isn't allowable.
Wasn't permitted.
No.
Another example is when Steve Doran did the remodel in professional center office building right north of the dance studio. There's that big red thing on the building. Is that an
Red
architectural
thing,
element
right.
or is that a graphic sign? If
Yeah,
you
we
read the
argued about
definition.
that.
Yeah. Another example, graphic sign says carved in, so the Devonish building, for example,
Mm-hmm.
has Devonish carved in to the masonry of the building facade instead of as a sign applied.
Right.
And then another example is Fat Jack's on their facade. They have a little Fat Jack man. Not necessarily a sign, but it's a giant logo. So that one could use a little bit of work.
Yeah, because I'm still not clear what a graphic sign is compared to Devonish's. I would call the wall signs just part, just right in. I don't.
And maybe we get rid of graphic sign, but instead we define the things that we know need to be defined, like murals.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Well, murals just go, I mean, if they're not allowed, they just go under prohibited signs, yeah. It seems like the whole definition should be gone. I've never even heard that term.
Signs are graphics.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I just,
I think it's an excellent point. I'd circled at the table asking what a graphic sign is, but I forgot to look at definitions.
It's, back to prohibited signs, anything on that? If not, move over to the next page, continuation. No illuminated sign shall be located. Traffic signal, okay. Non-conforming signs, comments on that section? And you added non-conforming because.
It helps clarify. Just for-
Should that be in definitions then?
Sure.
So move non-conforming sign definition to a definition?
Take out definition too.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Let's do that. Anything on maintenance and repair of signs? Anything on abandoned signs? Deteriorated, dilapidated. Administration. Who's our zoning administrator?
That's me.
Is that your title?
one of them.
One of them. What is the title?
City planner and assistant economic development director.
So who's zoning administrator?
I know. And
Why-
I'm floodplain zoning administrator.
So how,
Need a bigger car.
how does that task get assigned to your position, or how does? So if I were elected an organizational chart, nobody carries that string today.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is maybe defined elsewhere in the code.
I guess if we
or
could just
not.
look at that. I
Okay.
get it, it's you. but
It always was
it's not-
Paul.
Yeah, right, but
I just was unclear when Pat was here whether he was the zoning administrator or you were. I think he tried to take on some planning duties.
not for zoning.
Okay.
Left that fun work to Sonia.
Who would want to take on signs, right?
Application procedures. Following language revised slightly. What are your, after there?
Just to let you know that I took out the language, but it wasn't any major substantial changes.
Okay. Fees, are our fees competitive with the market?
I would think probably not, but I can do some additional research on that.
Structural requirements.
These are probably low.
I would say that too.
Yeah. I think just, let's find out what the market is and keep up with the market. Awnings and canopies,
Questions?
yes.
Actually, same question for both is why are we at 8 feet? There can be instances, I mean, a legal door has to be what, 6'8", 6'10", so why do we make the bottom of the canopy or awning be at least 8 feet? Is there a reason? I know it's always been that way, but looking at it, rereading it, I'm just questioning why. Because I know there's been circumstances where some people have wanted to put in an awning or something, but they couldn't get that 8 feet of clearance
An
because of
overhang.
something up above, yes. And to put in one that looked nice. So is 7 foot okay? I don't know why we said 8 feet. It'd be something to at the very least research what other communities do. I see a lot of times when people want to put canopies or awnings on, they want to bring a little intimacy into an area too, which is a little easier when it's 7 foot off the ground than 8.
8 feet is kind of out of reach for pedestrians, which is, we do wayfinding signage for bike or pedestrian paths. It's always minimum mounting height of 8 foot, so that
Keep the vandals
tampering
out. Yeah.
doesn't happen.
But if I have
That
a
might-
business and I got a little outdoor cafe in and I
Yeah,
want to put an
yeah.
awning in that's with 7 feet, it's my problem if my patrons eat it up, isn't it?
Yep.
So I don't say it should be 7. I'm just wondering why, if we're re-looking at everything, why we picked 8.
Under advertising, it says that no signage, business ID, commercial message, but then we had drive-through.
Except as allowed in the sign code. So there are some signs, but it's saying that it's under the jurisdiction of sign code if you're trying to put advertising on it.
So if the awning says drive-through, it's a wayfinding, that's permissible?
That should have been approved when they did it. I agree with you, but the point here, I like what she's got, is because we don't allow advertising, it calls it out that we don't, unless it's in accordance with our sign code, which has to have a permit.
That's why.
So that makes sense. Otherwise, you have a bunch of Corona and Pepsi and Coca-Cola and everything else, awnings and canopies up around town.
Anything else on awnings and canopies? Next page, exemptions. Sonia, what did you do to us here?
I saw this in the United States Sign Council model ordinance, and I thought it would be helpful in some instances to clear up anything that might be a question, such as address signs with the allowance to automatically permit up to 2 signs indicating address or number of occupants on the premise that do not exceed 2 square feet in area, with no commercial message or identification. Similarly, handicap parking space and other warning signs that might be in a parking lot, or signs which are not visible from a public roadway. For example, if you had, I think above the McDonald's doorways, they have a tiny little sign that says welcome. And they did submit that as part of their signage package. and the plan commission determined, well, that's not really an additional wall sign. It's not a directional sign that is mounted on the site. So is it exempt from the code because it's not visible from a public roadway?
I would argue that we shouldn't say it's not visible from a public roadway, because in that case, it's visible from the residence behind it.
Well, and say there's a parking lot and, say for a multifamily, and you've got a sign that says resident parking only, any any violators will be ticketed or towed. Is that an exemption? Should be.
Yeah, I don't know of any sign code that regulates those.
Should be.
Should be, but should we say it here? Those types of things. How do we say that here?
I think generally those can be called.
That would be a
warning
sign
signs.
required by municipal authority, because they won't come in and tow or ticket a car unless you have that sign up.
Well, you're not required to tow somebody from the
No.
spot.
But if you want help.
If you want help, you're going to have
That
that.
could be a tough way to define that.
Yeah. But warning signs, is that what you call it? Does that go in our definition? No dogs allowed. Whatever.
Regulatory parking signs?
All dogs must be
Regulatory
leashed.
is what they're typically called.
What?
Regulatory signs.
Regulatory signs?
Kind of a common term for them.
Thank you.
Another one that could be in this category is things like no trespassing.
And that'd fall under the regulatory sign definition?
Yeah.
Thank you. Some fines and penalties in section 117, have we revisited those fines and penalties? As far as what they are?
I know the city clerk was working on a complete overhaul of that
Right.
section. Did that ever go to council?
Moving to 13.1.234, sign district standards. And are we going to be adding a single family or? How are we going to do this? Chris?
Well, I think we need to add another table for that if we're going to have the district, but I also think we have to split sign table 2, and I'll get to it later on some of the things that are allowed and not allowed, but we talk about what may be allowed in sign table 2, we've lumped governmental uses and parks with multifamily properties, and in that one you show that you can have a changeable message board, or some pretty big signs, which I don't think we'd ever want to allow on a multifamily residential property. So I think there's very different uses for multifamily properties in parks and conservation areas.
I agree. So if you flip to the actual table, I think I was trying to address that. I didn't transfer it over to this section, but I added those uses: parks, government, schools, multifamily properties, neighborhood, small business, uses not located in a commercial Broadway or gateway district.
Right, so multifamily property not in that district, we have a lot of duplexes and 4 units and bigger buildings that aren't in those districts, and so then we would let them have a changeable message board and a few other things.
No, I think the actual standards within that district can be discussed like you're saying, but I was trying to differentiate.
It just seems
in
to
the
me that
title.
what we'd allow on a multifamily property might be substantially different than a park or a school. And we can talk about that when we get in there and then make that decision on how many tables we need.
But on the sign table 2, you mentioned that in this table apply to all multiple family properties, parks, conservancies, government uses, schools, religious uses. Isn't that in violation of Reed Gilbert? Because it's not content, it's who the user is.
It still allows you to differentiate between different districts, and I know that you can differentiate based on zoning districts, and I'm pretty sure you can still differentiate based on existing land uses.
Does that go
Something
back
that
to
was
this?
discussed.
Do we have to have it mirror this?
It could.
Yes, sir.
Chris, are you suggesting maybe a table 3 that would be multifamily and single-family properties? And get the multifamily,
They could be lumped together.
and get the multifamily just doesn't seem to, and I know it's been there, but it doesn't seem to go with parks and government and schools.
And the only difference I would see is you might, well, a little bigger sign
Right.
advertising rent or something, a multifamily, a single family, you could distinguish that in the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Because residential should stay together, perhaps, or maybe you do it by district. Perhaps some of it would be multifamily that's not in one of those other districts. Gateway, whatever it is up on Monona Drive would be under those sign standards, but if there's an apartment building off and not in a commercial district, then it would be subject to the residential table, which you wouldn't want a different type of sign allowed in the interior residential area than you'd allow on Monona Drive, for example.
So our districts are not the same as our land use. So should our sign code be tied to land use for the district that it's in? Rick, what do you think on that?
Well, we can define it in the sign code for whatever reason. If there's a purpose to be served by defining and designating a district, then we can do it. I don't know that we have to track the existing land use in every respect.
There can be different sign districts as well that are separate from your land use map, which is what we use right now. So it defines a district as Monona Drive, and that's the commercial district. So we can then break down the rest of the interior community differently. So I think that's something that I could play with as I revise the map and bring it back.
I mean, we want Monona Drive to be consistent. And we probably want Broadway to mirror Monona Drive, correct? Where the belt line, because of the higher speeds, might require...
Well, it does. We're totally different on the Gateway District right now. It's the only
Right.
place we allow pylons.
Right, but then we've got, so it does make sense to have it by district.
Yeah.
But when you get up into the industrial drive area, some of those internal areas don't have the need that Broadway does.
Correct.
Okay.
Does the residential fall into a district?
Sounds like we're making one.
Making a district? Okay.
Single family, multifamily.
Okay. And then we need the comprehensive signage plans because?
Be good to get your input on this. I listed them because when I started, there was no comprehensive list of these anywhere. I just happened to know which buildings had signage plans because I was working with Paul, who was working here for 23 years. So, having them codified somewhere and listed, because that is what the Plan Commission does, is require this as a comprehensive signage plan when something is built. And then this could be updated periodically.
Jim?
Sir.
That's kind of like when we're crafting our revision of our comprehensive plan, is when we start listing them, then as soon as something
Right.
changes, it's not in there. So that's probably the issue. And then, I don't have anything come to me right away, but I have no doubt we've forgotten something on there. There's probably a comprehensive plan we approved years ago on one of these. So the only thing that scares me a little bit is listing them saying these are it, then we'll have something we either forget or it gets presented next year and we won't have updated our sign code next year or the year after.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to have it identified someplace,
Absolutely.
but I don't know if this is the piece that should have it.
Agreed. But the definition's good.
Okay.
Or you could say examples of this are as follows, but then we always risk excluding somebody. I mean, we at one point had a comprehensive sign plan for the WPS campus.
Or you could say for a list of current comprehensive plans.
Yes, that'd be
see-
great. Such
Okay.
and such a reference document.
Yeah. And the reference document can change. Yeah.
Okay.
Easier to use. Okay, moving on to sign table 1.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Construction signs, almost every construction sign I ever see is 48 square feet. It's a 4x8 sheet of plywood. And I see we're saying 24, so why are we doing that?
32 square feet.
What?
8 times 4 is 30.
Oh, 32, I'm sorry, yeah. My math, but we're saying 24.
Good question. The existing code is 32, so I don't know why I changed that.
Yeah. So I would say,
And then 100 square feet in Broadway and Gateway District.
which is pretty good size. I see Gateway once in a while, we have those. It's pretty good size, but there's some that'll have 3 sheets of plywood on them. I've seen them made if they're trying to advertise towards the belt line. I'm not sure they need that to advertise towards Broadway. And then on flag poles, why do we only allow one? A lot of people like to have a U.S. flag and then maybe have a Wisconsin flag or a Packer flag or something along with it. Is that a bad thing? It's a discussion we should have. A lot of people like to see a set of 3 flagpoles for whatever reason. It makes some sense to have the U.S. one and then a couple lower. It might be the Monona flag or the Wisconsin State flag or UW flag or something.
Did we just approve that?
Pardon?
Did we just approve that at
We did.
WPS?
We did, but I'm just wondering, you know, it's just a discussion we need to have. Is there a reason to say you can only have one flag?
I think we should limit it so we don't have 6 flags.
What we do for directional is it says flexible, more than 3 requires plan commission approval.
Yeah,
Okay.
something along those lines would be great.
Memory serves, at WPS, did we approve a 35-foot
It
American
was
flag?
30.
Was it 30 and 25?
Mhm.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, once we do this is our code. Somebody can always come and ask for an exception to the code.
You're correct.
So if the new American TV comes in and wants to have their 40 or 50-foot flagpole, if the commission thinks it's appropriate, they can provide an exception to the code to allow that. And again, I have a question mark by graphic. I'm not sure what it is, but we have issues for us. I'm not sure how to react to those. One per use.
Change that to mural? Was that-
Well, but you know, if Devenish's carved-in name in the building is a graphic, then would that mean they can't have a wall sign or something else there? I'm not sure. I guess until we're clear on what a graphic is or what we're defining, it's hard to say how to regulate it. Sorry.
Are we ever going to be more clear? I think
I don't
that's
know.
the point.
We're hoping you find some really good information.
I haven't been able to so far.
Gil, you're gonna say-
Well, I don't understand why it exists at all.
Yeah.
Like, I just wouldn't even have it in there. There'd be no
Every sign-
definition, there'd be no nothing. I mean,
It's either a wall sign.
we're talking about signs here, and then we're kind of creating this ambiguity. I don't think it should even be discussed or written about or anything.
I think it's trying to get at something with painted or other symbols that are on the building, because you probably, you know, another one that was in the news was the Visions Club on East Washington. Did anyone recall that issue
Yeah.
where they had a dancer painted on the building? So is that a sign or is that not a sign? And similar situation when you're talking about
I
murals.
agree.
What is it? We had the question come up with Rutabaga, whether they were going to have a sculpted kayak on the outside. Was that a sign? What was it?
Yeah, they had a kayak, a real one up there, didn't they?
Well, they had a sculpture of some kind that portrayed a kayak.
Is that signage?
It's a
Graphic.
It's a real kayak, it's a kayak.
Or you've got, I think it's a Jade Monkey has a mural, and then you've got a big can of Pabst in the middle. That's a sign to me.
Yep. So we have to figure out something.
Say that again?
They've got a mural on this, they painted thing, and then right in the middle of it is this 5-foot can of Pabst painted on the mural. It's part of the artwork. What's the difference between that and the plastic,
I guess it
old style?
just continues to be a wall sign. I mean, anything like that is the kayak. I don't know what that is. I mean, it's architectural or it's a sculpture, whatever. I don't know.
So it would fall under wall sign then, is what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I just think just about anything does.
I think it's difficult too, because I mean, there are a lot of really great historic communities that have murals up and down their main street, and those are
Like Willie Street.
Yeah.
Moline's got a lot of it. They've got historic, they've got history, you know.
Well, absolutely. I mean, murals can be really cool. I don't see them as signs unless I guess maybe a sign has words incorporated into it.
So a 5-foot can of Pabst on the side of a tavern's not advertising?
Well, yeah, it's got words.
It says
Pabst.
Pabst.
Yeah, but what about a big logo?
Well, that's I made that comment with McDonald's new sign. I have no words on theirs.
So arch, so like golden arch, 12-foot tall would be okay? That's pretty clear what it is.
Yeah.
A lot of gray.
Or do we do it by exception, say any mural has to come before we get approval from the...
Well, you could have a section for mural that requires plan commission approval, and
It really, if you separate out mural, anything else is going to kind of obviously be a sign. When you start incorporating words.
Yeah, I would think
Reed
like
versus Gilbert?
the etching that Devonish has to
Oh,
be
that's
a
just
sign.
a sign, period.
Yeah, I think it's a
Yep.
sign.
Do you know when Hilton had all signs are required to be sandblasted wood signs, period. I just thought I'd stick that in
Those are
there.
some smart people.
All. No exceptions. Boy, is that a cool looking community.
What do you really think?
It is, I second that, I've been there a few times.
Okay,
Just an observation.
brought to you by Openwood Studios.
Yeah, Openwood Studios.
I was going to say, where does it say on here?
All right, let's keep moving. Anything else on this chart? We've got,
Yes.
yes, sir, go ahead.
Landscape ground signs must be 15 feet from the curb, but not in the right-of-way, but on Monona Drive, which is part of the commercial or whatever district, we do allow them in the right-of-way, because that's all Dane County right-of-way, and all those signs are in there. So is that just an exception every time?
I think we used to have a standard condition that said if the right-of-way was ever needed, sign
Yeah,
must
hopefully
be
we
removed
still
at
have that
first
condition.
expense. I know when we've come here, recently it hasn't been, but we should, I think, be doing that.
We always did it. And it's still, we had something about they had to talk to the county, because the county allowed it if we allow it. But it is in a right-of-way, and we have allowed them because of that excess right-of-way between Broadway and Frost Woods.
I think in general, it's dangerous if you
Okay.
upfront allow that to
Okay,
allow signs.
so leave it, and this
but
is an exception every time. Okay. What is a non-commercial free speech or insignia? protecting graphic, freestanding, landscape, temporary, it's pretty much anything. As long as it identifies a religious order or historic agency or a statement of speech. So that's basically anything could be in there.
Do not advertise business entertainment.
Right, but that's pretty much anything.
So this would be the historic plaques that we put up?
No, this could be.
It's probably going to get thrown out with Reed Gilbert.
So we can put a 100 square foot one in the Gateway District. That's pretty big. 60 square foot on Broadway's might be big. Is that 2 sheets
Why-
of plywood for a identification of a religious order or historic agency?
Where do we come up,
I got distracted here. Where you at?
non-commercial free speech or insignia?
Which is identified as an emblem of a religious order or historic agency, statements of speech which do not advertise a business, entertainment, or sales or service, and do not intend to produce any commercial benefit.
So why do we have this?
Just go on.
We didn't have a category when we were trying to put those historic markers up. It was the problem we had with our sign code. We identified our sign code didn't have them. If we went under our existing signs, we couldn't even allow the marker for Lindbergh over at the old Royal Airport, or the one down by the shop. What do we call it? Monona Motors.
Well, those are nowhere near 15 square feet.
Well, they're nowhere near 100. I know that.
Yeah, well.
Are intended to direct attention to a political, oh, I don't know what that, are intended to direct attention to a political, social community, or public service or idea. So that could be a political idea, so somebody could sign in any one of these districts to have a political idea. Wow.
Well, there's all kinds of, you could put.
You can put whatever you want in there.
So back to the purpose, if the purpose we wanted to have was allowing these historical markers, how many square feet would be appropriate?
What are they, like 2 by 4?
Not even that.
No, I would say,
They're pretty good size.
4 square feet. I mean, if you get out onto the interstate, the historic things that roadways and stuff, I mean, those are like 6 by 6, but.
But we don't have anything like that.
Yeah, but.
There might be some.
2 by 2 is 4 square feet. I mean,
They're bigger than that, the ones we have up.
Identify or
I mean, like what's out in front of Dean?
Out in front of Monona Motors
Yeah.
and out at Royal Airport. Those are both a little bigger than that. They're the standard Dane County historical markers.
4 by 2.
I think they're around 8 square feet or close.
Maximum 8 square
Why
feet.
don't we just figure out what they are and what we're trying to accomplish? But remember then, once we put this in, if somebody wants a 2 foot by 4 foot marker with political expression, no matter what that message is, they can put it out.
So,
It's approved by planning commission.
No.
Yeah, but you can't not approve it just because you don't like the message.
Yeah, as long as you meet the sign requirements.
It's a pretty broad thing. If you read that. Or an idea, aim, viewpoint, aspiration, or purpose.
Can we redefine this non-commercial free speech?
That would be
And just
great.
say it's
And then
for
the
historical.
Insignia
markers.
thing, what does insignia mean? Does that take us back to the barbecue place?
Well, like
Let's put a swastika out there.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
or the Royal Order of Buffalo.
Yeah.
Cross.
Flintstones, right?
I mean,
You could.
just delete the whole bottom of that and not even address it.
Well, we should think about it.
Well, I'm wondering if we change it, and if the purpose of having this in here so we allow historic markers, then we just say that. Historic markers can be up to 8 square feet. And then not allow anything else.
Yeah.
And highlight it very brightly in yellow and have the attorney really read that carefully, because I think we're getting in trouble.
Well, the attorney will take care of that.
Okay.
Make a lot of money, right, Bruce?
Well, for the purpose of allowing the plaques of recognized historic agencies, we can just define that part,
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
take out the rest of it, and just not reference it at all for the moment, anyway.
non-commercial free speech.
Yeah.
When you don't have to have
Excuse me.
I don't think we can
Yes,
eliminate them
yeah,
just
go
because
ahead.
we don't like the message.
I think,
Sonia?
Didn't say,
Oh, I'm getting off track, but I just wanted to say something before I forgot. So we were kind of getting rid of, all signs are wall signs unless they don't have words in it, as it were, so they're murals. So shouldn't you go back to graphic definitions and eliminate that and just define a mural as a graphic with no characters in it or something, no words in it?
that's the direction I was
Oh,
going
okay.
for next time, yep.
I'm about 15 minutes behind all the time, so.
All right, thank you.
On the non-commercial free speech, or Signia, I have a couple thoughts. It's in our original code, I don't know why it was there originally. One guess would be that you have to allow for some sort of free speech sign on a business property for an owner to put up a message if they want to, but then we could certainly regulate the size, at least. So I think,
Perhaps the best.
100 square feet is 10 by 10. Does everybody realize that?
Allowed, not in allowed areas, but we have to allow.
Yeah.
It's just like,
No, I think if our intent was to do the historic marker, limit it to 8 square feet.
yeah.
But that means anybody, I mean, unless we just eliminate commercial free speech, but I think we should find out if we can,
Right,
what other people do.
right.
and if you have a category just for historic plaques, that might be one of those Reed versus Gilbert issues, unless you put it under the exempt signs by a sign put up by any governmental authority.
Right.
Okay. Further research.
Next page. I think,
Top of the thing, I put in a note, in what cases should these be allowed? I said never.
well, wayfinding.
Oh, I thought we were on the next page, off
We are,
premises
but
advertising.
that to me is wayfinding. And I don't see that added here.
Off-premise
I think you can
advertising.
just change that to wayfinding.
Well, we've been asked many times for off-premises advertising. We've always denied it.
Right. But,
We have a definition for it. We should mention that it's not allowed,
right.
off-premises advertising, unless there's some circumstance that someone can think of where it would be appropriate.
Temporary. Have
We-
we done that?
We allowed it temporarily for WPS Bank to keep that sign up there because they were back in a thing, and they were, originally it was allowed because they owned the whole area. And therefore went to other signs because of that. But if we say not allowed, again, we can always make an exception. So, everybody will want off-premises advertising. Everybody will be buying to rent space from some other business with better exposure and put up
Yep.
signs.
Yep, somebody might even make it their
Business.
their business plan,
Yeah,
rent out advertising.
yeah.
So
Lose it.
lose it and then
Well, they can't lose
add
it.
a new category called wayfinding.
No, you can't lose
I'll
it.
make
You
it
you have it in the chart, but you
Well,
say
yeah.
it's not allowed.
Right.
Manually changeable reader boards, one per site, really?
No.
Commercial Broadway and Gateway districts, one per site. Manually changeable reader boards, 32 square feet.
I'd say no.
I'd say it too, it's our old sign code.
Not allowed, right?
Well, electronic message boards are prohibited.
When we wrote our sign code, there was no such thing. They were all manually changeable reader boards.
Well, you got them in the parks.
We do, but this isn't the parks. This is the Commercial Broadway and Gateway district. What we do have, though, however, is we have the school with one. We made an exception for.
Yeah, IHM has one, I
And then
believe,
we made an exception for ourselves until we got booted.
and the school has one.
Does Ken's have one?
Churches,
Yes.
some of the churches
Ken's is-
have, some can have.
Ken's is
one.
grandfathered in. It was legal when he had it, so it goes back in that definition that was legal when it was put in. So short of a major alteration, you can't really.
East Side Club has one.
East Side Club has one. Again, that was grandfathered in.
Right.
Is until you want to change your sign, you still get it.
Well, under our current code today, if someone came to us with a reader board, they can be allowed.
Change it.
Okay.
We've never allowed them.
We don't want to allow.
A manually changeable reader board. I'll just give an example is that, because I'm on the board of the East Side Club, and we've been talking about possibly taking down our pylon sign, but if we do it and we can't get a manual changeable reader board with all our weddings that we have there, welcoming people to the weddings, we'll keep our pylon sign.
Every business up and down Monona Drive will want to have a reader board.
And
And it
we'll
goes back
keep
to
our
traffic.
pylon.
Agreed, but that's an individual case. And what will happen there is, like everyone, the commission will look at it and say, well, if we get rid of a pylon but keep that, is that okay? And do we make an exception for that? But by saying it's not allowed, we can still make that exception as a commission if we feel it's in the best interest of the city, right? So, I mean, if I were that applicant, I would still approach the city and say, hey, you can get rid of a pylon sign, but only if we keep this.
If we keep that,
And we're
okay.
grandfathered in, we get to have it.
So just because we said it's not allowed, it still could be allowed with a special condition? Or,
The finding of fact I think you're getting at is,
Right.
if you gave up the pylon sign, it was a swap. You gave up the pylon
Wasn't even a
sign,
swap, we got rid of a pylon sign, but let you keep the reader board to get rid of the, yeah.
okay.
The churches?
Yeah, we have one at Immaculate IHM, we have it.
The
That's
high-
actually not in this district, but we do have it.
The high school
Well, it's
has
coming
one.
up, I guess. I'm
And
getting
then we-
ahead of myself. There's one right on Nichols here, whatever.
Yep,
Is
Nichols,
that-
St. Stephen's, or no?
No,
That's,
they don't have it.
it's, what's the name of it?
Across from the high school.
It's got
No,
the community
right on
gardens.
Nichols. I only drive by it a couple times a day.
Yeah, I walked by it on my way here.
Oh, yeah.
Methodist.
Pardon?
United Methodist?
Yeah, it's Paul's church.
Okay.
Okay.
But right now in commercial district, I would think we want to just not allow,
Okay.
correct?
I would agree.
Real estate signs, 16 square feet. A lot of real estate signs, if they've got a major building with something for rent, are again 4x8 sheets of plywood. And that's pretty typical. So
It
we
says
have to-
maximum of 16 square feet. That's not
That's half a
happening.
sheet.
Mhm.
That's our old code. It's not something you've changed, but something we should talk about. And again, I would treat Broadway more like Monona Commercial District and Gateway more by itself.
For the real estate, what are other communities, what's their standard?
I can research that.
Thank you.
And then again, we have removal after 1 year, but how do, what, take it out and put it back a day later?
Temporary ground or yard sign was added, not allowed.
We can ignore this one for now. It was more put in there as a placeholder for temporary solution to Reed versus Gilbert issues.
Which one?
The temporary
The
ground or
temporary
yard
ground
sign.
or yard sign.
That was the heart of a lot of the ruling, was part of that.
Okay.
If saying not allowed, then we don't have to worry about content, huh? So how did we get the 12 square feet on the temporary real estate open house?
This would be like 6 square feet.
Yeah, usually open house aren't that big. Now, this isn't a commercial district that we're talking about, nonetheless, it's rarely that big. But,
6 square feet. 6 square feet would be typical for that,
okay,
not 12.
Temporary wall.
wall.
What about banners?
Temporary wall sign is mainly banners.
yeah, that is a banner.
And we waived that during Monona Drive construction.
We did.
That was a good-
We waived the time limit on it.
Right, that was a good move.
It was. We've done a few things right.
Went from 90 to 91 businesses. Next page.
Well, if we're doing the whole page, this is where I talked about, I don't think multifamily property should be in the same place as parks and governmental and schools.
Right, we can move that though into, with single family, right?
Yeah, I think a residential section that, and then within the residential section, we'll have some areas we distinguish between single family and multifamily, I would think.
Okay.
And then where does neighborhood small business land? Is that the right place, or where should it be? Because neighborhood small business is Monona Motors and the bait shop.
Well, they're in a multifamily district. They will be in a multifamily district.
Well, no, they're in a neighborhood small business. They have their own little district.
Okay.
That's right there, and Femrite was zoned that way too.
Pardon?
And Femrite was zoned that way too. Those were the only two in that.
Why didn't know Femrite was neighborhood?
It was the yarn shop that was there before that.
Yeah, we put that into allowed in the house.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I forgot. But that might be different. Certainly you go back to you're allowing reader boards in the governmental schools and parks. We're not going to ask for reader boards in a neighborhood small business. If anything, neighborhood small business would be a more restrictive sign code, I would think, than anything else.
Mhm.
Sorry, another chart?
Yeah, probably. I'm just thinking the current bait shop has probably the most wall signs of any business.
Yeah, Monona Motors has wall signs, but, and they're not bad, it's just, it's different than certainly governmental schools and churches.
So you can move neighborhood small business to a chart of its own?
I almost would. You get a real short thing on the, here's what's allowed, right? Talk to the two property owners, tell them what we're doing, say, here's what we're saying, here's your existing signage, we think it's fine, here's what we think is allowable,
Yeah.
and get any comments they have. It's only two businesses.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Finishing up the table above that, there were a couple things. I have wall sign highlighted yellow, but that was just, it wasn't intended to be highlighted for Reed versus Gilbert. But it does need some work in that last box, because this is what we talked about last time, where the relationship between wall signs and multi-tenant ground signs. So this still says where multiple uses are located in one building, wall signage shall generally identify each use, while off-building signage shall identify building only. And then I added, or meet the standards of multi-tenant ground signs, which we haven't yet created.
Perfect.
Okay.
Did we want to continue multi-tenant ground signs? If everybody's got their shingle up on the sign ban, you need multi-tenant ground signs.
I'll argue our building, we don't put any signs on the building. We have one sign that that identifies our building and with the tenants in there. I know Crawford Landing does that. There's a lot of places
It's
that...
one or the other. No, Crawford's Lane.
Well, Crawford Landing has the channel letters.
They're both, but they have the multi-tenant, Dale could speak to it, but it's really important for all those people to have their name out there.
It just is, that's a real problem. I mean, retailers in particular, in the case of your building where it's an office building, that's usually not as much as an issue, and that's nice that there aren't any on the building. Then, we need to allow them to do that multi-tenant sign out front, particularly if they're not putting letters on the building. But it is just a huge leasing problem for retail when you can't list the names on a freestanding sign, which I will argue have, little to no merit in some of those high-traffic areas, but they just want them out there. They just want them out there.
If it's a well-done sign, it can be an attractive sign.
Yeah, definitely.
We can limit how many spaces and what's on there, but I think there should be some way to allow people to do it.
I think one of the problems that comes up that makes it so challenging, and this is my concern with Trace's sign, is when additional tenants in there, it's going to look downright silly, because I'll still argue that they're going to have 2-inch letters in there at best. And between that and the fact that the property is perpendicular to Broadway, I mean, that can kill a lot of leases. Who's going in there?
Well, back to what she's written here. Does it meet the will of its body, the direction we want to go?
I think it does. Then we'll have a multi-tenant ground sign standard. Which is what we've been approving for the last 20 years.
Okay. All right. Anything else on sign standard table 2?
I have one on the window sign. I just wanted to make sure, Chris, if that met what you were talking about
Yes,
earlier.
that's perfect right
Okay.
there. Maximum 50%, and it must be affixed and visible from the outside. I think that's perfect.
Okay.
Where should single-family sign standards be located? Their own spot, single,
Okay.
or maybe residential sign standards, we'll call it.
Okay.
Anything else on this page?
Yes. What's the first one, auxiliary sign, under standard 2? Sign standard, table 2,
Sign
auxiliary.
which provides secondary information such as price, sales information, hours of operation, parking regulation, warning signs, or directories of tenants in buildings.
So where are we going to put those, in parks, governmental, or schools?
Wait, why can't we get rid of it?
That's why I'm wondering why we would, I mean, what auxiliary sign would we be thinking we're going to put in that section?
The term you used, Dale, on for
Hours of operation?
regulatory signs?
No.
Do we really want the school to have hours of operation out front?
Yeah, we need to have, the regulatory signs, like if you look at the auxiliary sign definition, so we can include like warning signs and stuff, but the rest of this is all kinds of things that would go on manual, changeable reader boards. Right?
Which is defined later on
Price,
in the
sales
section.
information, hours of operation.
Yeah, and back in the definition, it says, or directories of tenants in buildings. We don't want that because we're going to come up with a multi-tenant ground sign.
Well, and would we have a multi-tenant ground sign in table 2?
No.
Park, governmental, schools, we're taking out multifamily, not located on commercial Broadway or Gateway District.
And for auxiliary, we wouldn't want to provide information such as price, sales information, hours. Parking regulation and warning would be about it, so I think we changed it to regulatory sign.
Or just, no, leave auxiliary, but just say not allowed, and then have regulatory signs allowed, unless there's something I'm missing that should be allowed.
I think the intent of this definition was to be those sorts of things that are not visible from public rights of way and those things that we were talking about that fell under the exempt sign status. So,
Well, if it's exempt, it doesn't have to be in the chart.
well, back in our language here, we had a separate section, 13.1.231 exemptions. And that included things like the warning signs, regulatory signs, address signs, signs required by municipal authority.
But if they're exemptions, then we don't need to list it in here if they're already exemptions, correct?
Right, then we just cross out auxiliary.
Or just say not allowed. Because the auxiliary definition is different than the exemptions, because we do have a definition for auxiliary signs, which,
So you're saying get rid of the definition of auxiliary and get rid of it here?
no, I'm saying leave it, because if you go back to table 1, we do have auxiliary or directory, and we allow one at 16 square feet, but that's within a commercial district or a gateway district. But now we're on the table 2, where we're parks, governmental, and schools. Do we want to allow auxiliary signs there? I mean, if we don't, then we should leave, I mean, the definition needs to be there, but then we should just leave it in there, but say not allowed.
I think we do want to allow them, and I think
Okay.
we're not all on the same page about what that sign is, because I think
No.
it is, like, I think auxiliary sign is actually intended to be a handicap sign or a sign on the front door as you walk up to it and you're a pedestrian and it says hours of operation.
Well, then we don't need to list it because it's under the exemptions.
Exactly.
Then we wouldn't need to list it on table 1 either. But that's not the same sign, because you're saying it's a maximum of 16 square feet, while a handicap sign
Yeah, and I don't
is not a
think
16
that's-
square foot sign.
I don't think that size.
It's not right.
I'm sorry, now going back, under table 1, auxiliary, and it says pump price signs. Where do we allow
We do allow,
gas price changing to take place?
we allow it, I know PDQ has it on the post for the canopy.
But where do we allow it in here?
It's right there, it's an auxiliary or directory sign, under standard 1.
Say it again?
Table 1, the first thing, auxiliary or directory, it talks about pump price signs, but it's contradictory. It says may be erected within pump island, but must be fixed to the building, so I'm not sure which one.
That's what I'm getting at, because we've got one on Monona Drive that's not attached to the building.
Right? Maybe two. Where's Speedways? They've got the ground sign. Do they have any on the pumps?
When, what's he got?
I don't know about Shai's probably got it on the pump island, and then you go down to,
The shell.
yeah, on Broadway. I think they've got it on the pump island. And that's typical for a service station. And it's a legal requirement that they have to post their prices.
So, must be fixed to the building, get rid of that? Because it's not.
Right, and I don't think the first statement makes sense either.
First statement, pump price signs may be erected within pump island. That's kind of what we do.
Or,
If they want something different, they have to come to us, right?
Yes. But at that point, 16 square feet is probably, I don't know, Dale, that'd be reasonable for a pump sign, isn't it? Because there's
You know what they look like?
3 brands usually, 3 levels.
There's 3 or 4 numbers.
Yeah.
No, they're probably considerably larger than that.
Larger, you think?
Yeah,
Than 16?
16 square feet, yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't think so.
To include like all 4
Yeah.
prices and stuff.
Maybe we do a little research on that. Do it there.
And what's the station that, it's over by Walmart?
So doesn't PDQ have a freestanding sign, right? with
Well, it's attached right to the canopy column, I believe.
16 square feet is really small.
Well, let's just see what they
Yeah,
have.
I would guess that they're considerably larger than that.
So I guess the point is, I think auxiliary sign or whatever is important to have in the sign code, but then do we have a reason to allow it in the table 2? Then it would be just not allowed if that is the case.
But then you have to change the auxiliary sign definition, because now you're saying in table 2 that parking regulatory signs are not allowed.
Well, I think we make a category called regulatory signs.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
That will be gone.
Parking regulations might just be under the excluded signs or whatever, too.
Parking warning signs or whatever would be under
Yeah.
regulatory.
Okay.
But then, do we want to keep directories of tenants and buildings, and say in the commercial district, you can have a 16 square foot sign with directory of tenants? I think not. Sign code isn't easy, is it?
Okay, back to table 2, any other flagpoles, we should be consistent, any more than 3 requires approval?
Well, once we have that discussion, yeah, how many is okay?
For next draft.
Yeah.
3.
I'm okay if somebody wants to put.
Graphic, same thing, we're gonna change graphic to mural.
And then landscape, we're saying 2 permitted per park. In this section, then, would governmental or schools be allowed 2 landscape signs? Or would we be better off saying 1 allowed, and we get to a certain size limit, then 2 may be allowed? Because I know we have larger parks, but you could also say a larger entity, so we're not discriminating against the user.
Last page.
Manual changeable.
No,
You're on.
but we allow them. But
Is that a grandfather thing?
we've allowed it for the church, we've allowed it for our parks. So as long as we limit it and we don't have multifamily in here anymore or some other things, or the neighborhood small business, then I guess we're all right saying we allow one. And take out unique business need to say unique need, because this isn't a business district. Again, I don't know what the non-commercial free speech or insignia is.
We're going to change that to, and the square footage, just be consistent.
And then on this one, we have temporary wall signs. On the other one, we allowed 2. On this one, we're allowing 1, but are the parks or, I mean, parks do put up temporary, but they're not wall signs. They put up temporary banners, like for the farmer's market and things like that. It's hard because we have to think about each table in respect to who we're regulating.
Temporary wall.
Temporary wall signs, signs such as banners which are intended to display either commercial or non-commercial
A
message.
school may put up a banner for some
Absolutely.
kind of event,
Absolutely.
run or
School, a church,
Yeah.
absolutely. Without a doubt.
How about size there? Is that sufficient?
Smaller than we allow in other districts. I thought we had 32 square feet, didn't we, in other districts?
Yeah, and it probably should be 32 square feet.
A banner?
Yeah, I mean, the church throws up
Yeah,
their
2 foot
having
high,
a
that's only 8 foot
fall
long.
festival, I
Yeah.
mean, 32 square feet's not.
Yeah, 2 foot high, you could go 16 feet, and that would make more sense.
Where do churches fit in table 2? It says parks, governmental, and schools.
I thought it was. Well, certainly Immaculate Heart would fit in there because it's a school.
But we should probably say schools too. Oh, I see. Yeah, but churches aren't in there.
Yeah, well, how does Reed Gilbert affect that?
Yeah,
True.
yeah, churches aren't listed for any sign requirements.
In our current code, it says public and quasi-public.
So,
That's fine.
Under what?
another one you didn't want to define?
Right.
Under schools you have, it's that?
Yeah, this table in our current code is called multifamily residential parks, governmental, public, and quasi-public.
Oh.
So I'll play with that too.
I just-
Okay.
So we should look at this again.
Oh, yeah. And then
Probably
we're
every
going
time.
Church signs all.
to have a conversation with the city attorney too, as, yeah, we don't want to run up big tabs with them, but are we, are we going to, is it a waste of our time to go through this and then just have him come through and cut out half of these categories? Because they violate this. If he can give us some sort of
Guidance.
guidance as far, on how best to prepare a document for his review. Might be worthwhile. Because I can, look at these thinking, we're gonna go through all this effort and then he's just gonna cut.
I'm only laughing because as Criff mentioned, it'll be a year before we know the answer to that.
I know. Or maybe he'll say, just do what we wanna do and then we'll fix it later. All right, thank you so much for everybody's effort into that. Reports of staff and commission members, 7A, staff report regarding status of development.
Don't we have these to look at?
6B, review of comprehensive plan series, map series, thank you.
Can I start?
Yeah.
When our subcommittee reviewed these, we found a discrepancy in that our land use map is substantially different than our zoning map. And in the past, we've always used our land use map to enforce it, but according to Sonia, they should probably match. So there's a couple areas in here we need to pay, there's some changes that we need to talk about. There's a couple areas we need to pay particular attention to. If you look down by Bartell, Ford Street, that area, if you look at what the existing land use is, there's a smattering of multifamily. The zoning map shows multifamily all the way through that area, including up into Southern Circle, which would be a substantial change in what we have there, and I think would create havoc with all the single-family residential homeowners that live in there. And the other area that we really need to look at is behind Frostwood Commons, where it's virtually all residential now, and the zoning map shows it as multifamily. So those are a couple areas we need to discuss. And is that our intent? Our intent never was in the past to have that multifamily, but the zoning map has always been that way. And we've never put the two together to get them to match.
Yeah, I think the other, across from the high school, the existing land use map shows some commercial fronting Monona Drive. The future extends that to Gordon Avenue.
We did that on purpose, thinking that to redevelop that area, we needed the depth, and if you look at that, the zoning map would have to be changed also to correlate with that if we make that change, to add that depth on there for redevelopment of that area. So I believe the zoning map has to be changed along with this, for whatever we decide is appropriate course. There's going to be some changes to both.
Like what you're talking about does show on future land use.
Well, that's our proposal for future
That's a
land use, but
proposal.
not everything that's on here is our proposal for future land use. Some of it's been made to match up with the zoning map, which I for one, think it would be a huge change to Southern Circle and that area there to introduce multifamily up into there. I think that the change in front of the high school would be a good change to get some depth on there so we can have some reasonable proposals to redevelop that area across from the high school.
Sonia, anything you want to?
Yeah, I'll just do my own little introduction. As Chris was saying, we never had a future land use map, and I understand why that the zoning map sort of functioned as that mechanism to get our future land use map. However, the future land use map is definitely a requirement of the comprehensive planning statute, and it is very important. It's essentially, if you had to take the entire comprehensive plan narrative and boil it down into a graphic depiction, you'd end up with something like this future land use map. It's supposed to be your policy. It's where you want your future land use to be 20 years from now. And then your zoning map is what you use to get to that point. So this future land use map is brand new. It was created with the help of the subcommittee, which is Mr. Homburg and Chair Bussey. So this is what we can really pick apart today and make sure that that's what everyone agrees on. The existing land use map should be absolutely perfect, unless there's an error that you find. Otherwise, it's not really up for debate because it should just reflect what's out there today. The zoning map similarly should reflect what we've been using in the past, but as we identify things on the future land use map, we'll want to make note of things on the zoning map that need to be changed so that the two are consistent. As far as timeline, I think it's most important to agree on a future land use map and get that done so we can finish the comprehensive plan, and then make note of the zoning map changes to be made within the next year. So some of the areas that Chris was pointing out are in the memo that was attached to it, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we can start with number 1 if you want.
So number 1 would be the blocks that we just talked about at Gordon Avenue, Spring Haven, Cold Spring, correct?
Across from the
To
high
add
school.
depth.
Do we add enough depth to have reasonable redevelopment there, or do we keep it real shallow in that area?
Yeah. Any comments? People are comfortable with that?
I'm sorry, where are you?
Across from the high school.
Across from the high school,
Oh, just going over to Gordon?
Gordon Avenue, yeah, basically.
And then what was the single-family residential on the corner past, right down on, what is it, Cold Spring? We've taken the commercial all the way to Cold Spring and made it the full depth to try to encourage something to happen in that area. The only reason one area is blue is because the city owns it right now. It would be part of the redevelopment. So I'm not sure. I think future land use should be read all the way through. It might be governmental existing, but it's future land use. Our intention is for it to be commercial, correct?
That's actually the church property.
Oh, that's the church. Okay, sorry.
But
Sorry.
there's,
Regardless.
Still commercial. Yes, still be commercial.
that stretch, I mean, basically Monona Drive was, there's some single family, there's some smaller multifamily, and it was basically what's the future going to be, then the future would be commercial. That would be the goal. So that's changed. Even the existing Fairway Glen any future change in that property, the goal would be for it to be commercial. Probably won't happen for my lifetime, but, so then, Sonia, number 2 is block owned by Gordon Wallace, St. Teresa Starry. Same thing. We're just basically converting all of that into, no, that was multifamily, correct?
Can I back up a second?
Yeah.
That blue spot that's the church property across from the high school, are we saying that that should be red?
No, no.
We don't want that to be?
It's religious. It's probably going to stay that way.
But if this is future, wouldn't...
Well, if they use that reasoning, then Nichols School should be red.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
If that's what we wanted, but we don't.
I don't want to take the church away.
Well, I don't want to take it away either, but churches are located in single-family residential districts, they're located in multifamily districts, they're located in commercial districts. That doesn't mean you can't put a church in it.
Do you want to change it to red?
I don't know. This is a good discussion to
Yeah.
have, because wherever we've got a church, we show government/institutional, so is church institutional?
This is a future land use plan, and if the church sells that property, do we want it to be commercial? I would think you'd want to continue that.
Good point.
I don't,
same logic
for
we
the
used for,
Nichols School, I don't think
Fairway Glen.
necessarily. But I don't know.
It would make sense that it's red. You're not saying your future long-term plan is to have an institutional organization there, your church there, so I think to your point, it would make sense that it would be red.
If they sold it, it would be zoned, or it would be a future use for commercial.
Yeah.
Sonia, you got any issue with that?
No, I don't have an issue with that, and I think it reflects our zoning, our current zoning, because you'll notice there's no, and in other areas where a church is located, the property zoning would either be yellow or dark
Right.
blue.
Okay. The, so, going once, going twice, we'll change that to red.
What about the other church on, that backs up to Rose Lawn? That's multifamily along there. If that church went, would that be a multifamily development then?
And the zoning there currently is single family.
That has, that access to Monona Drive is tough there, right?
Well,
One side is
exactly
commercial, the other
single
side is multifamily.
No.
Not on the Monona Drive side.
So what's your suggestion, Mr. Gould?
There isn't, I'm just saying that to me, that looks the same as a church up on the other end.
That's true, and it should be split, and the portion on Monona Drive should be probably multifamily, and the portion on Roselawn should be single-family.
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, that would be a nice multifamily location
Probably.
on Monona Drive,
Right.
recessed down
That
there.
would make sense to have the two districts
Yeah.
divided through, you know.
But we're not splitting, we've never split.
You could do this for every church in the city.
Yeah.
I just think the map would look nicer if it was yellow and red.
Our zoning map shows it all as single family. Our existing
But
zoning.
we haven't split, it's one lot, one parcel, right? We haven't split.
You'd have to look, it's not necessarily one parcel.
What I'm seeing on the zoning map is that there is a parcel line.
Yeah, looks like it.
There is?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So really the question is, should what's on Monona Drive be multifamily or commercial? I would argue that it is a really nice multifamily location.
It doesn't have the visibility to be commercial.
Commercial, yeah, of course, it's all recessed down like that.
Yeah.
It's dropped way down, so it's a nice
So split that yellow and orange? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Then, kind of backing up to the second point, Gordon Avenue, Wallace, St. Teresa, Starry. This would be between Wallace and Gordon. The existing one has multifamily along Gordon. The future shows multifamily Wallace and Gordon because there's two-family zoning in that area, correct, Sonia?
Correct.
And that this would be consistent.
I would, where do you mean, where is there two-family zoning? Just because it's there, but the current use is single-family, and I think when we talked about it, we said, well, it would be a better separation because you don't have the uses back-to-back. We have them back-to-back right now, and I'd argue if we change that, then all those properties on Wallace could convert, and I think we'd be there'd be a major change to the character of that single-family residential area by doing that. I'm not sure that we should be doing it. Right now, single-family, I think you did it for extra depth because it was up the road, but I think there's existing single families. I think before we did that, we at least should talk to the neighborhood, let them know we're talking about changing their zoning to multifamily. Or their land use. We've regulated, I know the zoning shows it, but to me, this is one where the zoning map should be changed instead of the land use plan. We've regulated in the past with our land use, because that's what's there, is single-family homes. And now we're saying, well, the zoning map says it's multifamily, so we're just going to change your zoning to multifamily now. Your neighbor can tear it down and put up a dupe or a 4-unit.
A 4-unit, yeah.
And I think that's a substantial change to the character of that neighborhood on Wallace.
So you're recommending keeping it as is?
I would.
Okay.
I would, well, would you extend that half block to that next street, that one little yellow
I wouldn't because that's a single-family home right now. I don't know.
future? I mean, if it's that whole side of the street is
Why-
multifamily,
I guess, and it backs up.
I mean, future land
Yeah.
use,
Yeah, you could go to the corner.
it's nitpicky, but
But that's what we're supposed to be doing, is nitpicking right now.
I would take it to the corner, personally.
I guess it boils down, Chris, you're right, if we're not, the zoning map shows it's multifamily, but if we don't want it to be, then the future land use should show it as it is. And then we should probably change the zoning map.
Correct.
Yes.
Is everybody okay with
You're
that?
talking about between Nichols and Valerie?
No, between
Go to IHM.
St. Teresa and Starry.
Go to IHM on Schofield and then between Wallace and Gordon. And look at the existing
Yeah.
and the future. Wallace and Gordon has been, it's now, in the future, is reflecting the zoning, which makes it multifamily. And Chris's point is, why not just keep it the way it is? Why change the character of the neighborhood?
Gotcha.
So
So it'd be yellow all the way up to Teresa?
it'd be yellow on
Along Wallace.
along Wallace and on the corner. And then at some point we should probably change the zoning map.
I think sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Rob's point
Well-
was that little corner, do you extend the orange all the way to the corner?
No, just keep it.
Keep it the way it is. Because if somebody ever wants to tear it down, then they go through the process and a zoning change
Yeah.
to put in some multifamily, but then it goes through due process with the neighborhood too.
Griff, any comments?
Well, I'm just a little concerned about, we've had some major issues in the past of people coming in and saying, what do you mean that you're changing it? I'm just thinking about these church things. These churches are established institutions. They're marked here as institutions. And now all of a sudden we're changing this to future land use and we're telling them that this is going to be commercial. I think we're asking for a lot of discussion and disturbance over that we don't need to generate. If it changes,
If there's a change in use, it's going to come back here anyway.
it's going to come back here anyway.
So
why are we precipitating a real issue with it? The people along
we don't want one of the churches to grab these and see that their property.
Right, all of a sudden,
We
why are we?
want this to be commercial.
Yeah, we want this to be commercial.
Who's going to use the future land use map, and they're going to look at this and say it's a church, and they're not going to bother with it? Or if it's a church, they know that they're going to have to jump through a bazillion hoops to make it something different.
Oh.
So so I guess I'm agreeing with you.
It's not pushing them out. Isn't it a simple explanation that
I don't think they buy that explanation.
Why?
I
If-
think
if
they
no,
say,
because this is our future land use plan, and if that,
but why? If they're gonna say, if this is your future land use plan, are you telling us we're not welcome in Monona? That you want to convert our church property to some commercial use?
we explain it to them that you're welcome here. We're not. This isn't push out. But if
what
you
do we
decide
gain?
to leave,
What
this
do
is
we
our
gain
future
by
plan.
raising the whole issue in the first place?
Because this is our plan.
It isn't our plan. As long as the churches are continued to be there, we have no intention of changing that use.
You would then have to go to every church on here and convert it.
That was my. I agree. That opens up a can of worms.
Yeah.
So why do that? Because we have because our future plan is for them to be here.
Yeah, and our future plan presumably is.
Let's not.
Oh, that's, yeah. Well, that, I don't know, that kind of just cleared it up right there. They are our future land, I mean, we want them to be there,
Right.
so they are the future land use.
I mean, it might change, in which case we're gonna go through a whole change anyway, but I just don't think we should be declaring that this is our intended future use for their property that is totally different from what they have.
So I suppose you're gonna have a problem with changing Squaw Bay over to parking.
Yeah.
I mean, a church could
Is everybody comfortable?
A church could come in, though, and say, we're moving to a new location, and we'd like to convert this or put it up for sale, and he could come and get a zoning change.
Oh, yeah.
Sure they could. Okay, so we're going to keep the church. We're going to keep the red on Monona Drive. We're going to change the orange between Wallace and Gordon back to the existing land use format because we don't want to disrupt the neighborhood. And somewhere along the line, I'm just repeating what I think I heard. Somewhere along the line, we're going to change the zoning map to reflect that. Is that, so far, everybody's in agreement? Or the majority in agreement?
Well,
Go ahead, Griff.
we have, the present zoning allows for the multi-family use in that area.
Mhm.
And we've gone through that. The idea originally, I think the idea originally was that we wanted to have that option of depth in that particular area. There isn't any proposal, but if it's zoned that way already, then I don't have too much problem with the future land use map just reflecting it and not doing anything.
And why did they take precedent with the disruption of the neighborhood versus the residents on Gordon that were bringing a commercial up to their front doors?
Well, because it's already zoned that way.
No, it's not. It's zoned to single family on those northern properties. Adjacent.
On the northern
It's
properties,
just unredevelopable the way it is.
you can't,
But to argue the point, it's disrupting that single-family neighborhood, whereas we're reverting or changing the zone. It's just,
Well, actually, I don't have too much problem with leaving it that, with a single-family neighborhood. I'm just asking if for some reason or other, we've already gone through the process of getting the zoning changed and they didn't object to the zoning change, why isn't the first, go ahead.
Oh, I disagree a little bit. I don't think we ever take, I mean, unless it was before I was here, I don't think we ever taken the time to compare the zoning map and the land use. And we've never prepared a future land use plan before.
Okay.
And I think we definitely changed the character of that neighborhood to leave it with multifamily. And we've never allowed it when people came in. We've always looked at our land use plan and used that as our banner and not that zoning. I think some of these areas, especially when you get down into Ford and Southern Circle and Falcon, is a substantial change to the character of that neighborhood. And I would, for one, want to have a lot of public hearings and make sure all those neighbors knew that we were going to convert their neighborhoods to multifamily, or allow that. I think, to me, this is cleaning up a zoning map that's really not reflective of what we're looking for.
To answer, Rob, your issue, you can't redevelop that commercial stretch without adding depth. They're just too shallow. Right now, there's single family backing up to that. In their backyard the property lines are right at the commercial. If, with the way it's laid out for future, you'd have the width of the street to separate the two, and we'd have an opportunity to have any development come before us to make sure that the presentation to the neighborhood is acceptable. So I'm okay with that. This other one, I don't see where we're going to change much between Wallace and Gordon. I think it's just...
You could argue in the land planning basics that you would have multifamily between single family and commercial.
Yes.
You know.
Well, I don't have too much.
That's where you're arguing to keep it, well, to change it to single family. You know, just like I say, land planning basics would typically have it be multifamily as the buffer between single family and the
But
commercial.
we have all existing uses is the problem. We've been dealt our hand, and we have all those existing uses. And so I would say we don't change a neighborhood, the character of a neighborhood, without talking to that neighborhood.
What's the process on this?
Well, the process for the future land use map is to agree on a policy direction for the next 20 years to finish the comprehensive plan. To do a zoning change, it's more in-depth, requires all the public hearings and a statutory process. But I think we should compile a list of zoning changes after the future land use map is agreed upon, and we work on that over the next year.
Well, back to what I'm hearing. I'm now hearing leave the churches alone, don't mess with them. I'm hearing a mixed reaction between keep the red on the future land use north of Dean Avenue, and I'm hearing between Wallace and Gordon revert back to the existing plan. Now we got to move on to the rest of it, which are we down to your concern?
We would be on
Ford
number
Street
3.
and Bartels, which
That's
is
a big area.
the zoning has two family and multifamily. You know, it's got basically two family in that area, which is what it is. The future land use doesn't go that.
What it is what the existing land use shows.
You want to keep that?
It's just two family.
No.
There's islands of multifamily, but yeah, you're right. They're basically two family. I think there might be 1 or 2 4 units in there, aren't there?
Okay.
I think there are.
Yeah, I think so too.
But it's a smattering. What the zoning map shows is a huge change to that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, that's massive.
So what's the
There's a
feeling?
bunch of single family in Ford.
Oh, all those places.
That's all.
This shows multifamily going up Southern Circle.
So are you
Well, actually,
suggesting?
you mean on the zoning map?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, make sure that everybody's seeing the distinction between two-family and multifamily. And that's showing two-family, right, as opposed to multifamily. So there's no fourplexes would not be allowed, or, right? I
Right.
just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing, because
But
we're saying multifamily, but it isn't.
Well, we are and we aren't, because the future land use says multifamily and it doesn't have a distinction, and
Right.
it's a massive area compared to what's there right now, including, we didn't talk about, we would buy it, but Frost Woods. Frostwoods behind Frostwoods Manor or High, or whatever we call it there. That area right now is a smattering of multifamily, and it shows the whole area of multifamily.
So you want to keep it the way it was?
I'd like to keep it with what we have. We have all these single-family homes in there. Again, I would want to have a public hearing and get all the people from Falcon and Bartell. I mean, there's hardly any on Bartell now, and that's all filled up. Southern Circle, get everybody here and say, hey, you want to come, would you like to see multifamily in this whole area?
Guess the response.
I know what the response is.
So-
I already know the room will be full.
Save our.
And so why would we want to buck that or fight that? I mean, we have it existing in our community, and I know it's horrible zoning practice, Sonia, because it's spot zoning, but that's what we have right now. And short of, I don't know where you draw the line and tell them, well, your neighbor can convert to multifamily.
All right, what if instead of spot zoning, the stuff that's listed as multifamily, do we show that as being future use single family? That's not spot zoning. So if I tear down that duplex, I put up a single home? Or do we stick with spot zoning?
Okay, so if the goal in this area was to maintain mostly single family, then the process would be to show single family on the future land use map and then recommend a zoning change to the zoning map. And it wouldn't be spot zoning as much as it would be down zoning, or taking away their ability to develop it for a potentially more valuable property or more density or intensity of use to something less.
And that could be done in a public forum where owners of there could come and say, I'm all for it, or we'll find sand.
This future land use map has no legal standing, does it?
It's a policy document.
It's policy,
and
so, okay.
The rules are the zoning map.
Good.
Okay, so the next thing I'm hearing is we keep the existing land use plan for area, or item number 3 on Sonia's handout. Number 4, future land use is largely based on already accepted zoning. Please refer to the zoning map, note the areas we've done that, right?
Yep.
Correction. Okay, any further discussion? Sonia, does this make any sense to you, or?
I have one.
Yep.
Our neighborhood small business, the existing land use shows what's there, which is the bait shop and Monona Motors, and there's a really nice duplex in between.
Yep.
And on the future land use, we show that all commercial. Do we really want another neighborhood small business in between there, or do we want to just leave the nice duplex that's there?
My vote is that we'd have a neighborhood small business there.
It's actually zoned for retail business.
And that, on the other hand, I think might be spot zoning if you change it.
I just wanted to bring it up, because that's not what's there, and I don't have a strong feeling one way or another.
I think if I'm the homeowner there, I'm probably, if I'm going to sell my home, and if I could get more money for it by turning it into a little retail business, I might be happy.
Might be tough sell down there, man. Those businesses struggle.
I understand.
It's neat for the history of our community, but it's a tough place to do business.
I know.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question. It looks to me, I'm looking at following up what Dale said about the two-family. It looks like that whole area down by the river was zoned as two-family, but in fact, the development is multi-family all through, spotted through that area. Is that right?
Well, there are some 4 units, and Pirate Island is multifamily, but that is a different zoning on it, and I certainly would
It's a
suggest
commercial
we change-
design district.
Yeah, and I certainly would suggest we change that.
Oh, all right, okay. Yeah, that part. I see it's a little
Yeah,
different
it's a little
color.
different color.
Yeah, okay.
When Jim makes these meetings go so late, our eyes get blurry.
Okay, moving along. The last handout is the bike route, bikeable streets. So I can't bike down my street? And how do I get, I understand that we wanted as much traffic as possible on West Dean right in front of Kugel's, but how do I get there? It just seems like there's that little stretch, do we just have to go back and forth between Rothman and Dean to? These don't seem to be connected, are they?
Yeah, they're connected.
How?
So,
Bike route,
Bikeable streets, I don't get it.
well, it doesn't have a bike route, but they think it's wide enough to bike on.
Yeah, but look at West Dean, why isn't it?
Well, then it's a bike route once you get past Midmore. I don't know why.
yeah, so I didn't do this map, but the idea behind it is that where you see just that leg like that is to eliminate double lines on any one road. So underneath that, there might be the route,
Who did the map?
GIS staff.
GIS staff?
So,
Which is Monona staff?
Yep.
or-
So we have Shannon Hayden, project manager, has recently left for another job, and the new person is Brad Brune.
But, I don't get it.
Somebody put a lot of work into it.
But, bike route, bike path,
Is I don't know if it's a Madison bike path or a county bike path or whatever that, when we ride our bikes around the lake and follow the bike route, is that route identified on here?
Strictly a walking or bicycle path, and it's a bike path. No vehicular traffic. It's not shared.
And that's not
So
in,
there's only one section, and that's just across the bridge.
and that's not in our,
Right.
in Monona.
The Lake Loop bike route that you were just referring to, Dale, is the blue dash line. I think the confusion that we're having is, say, you're coming along the lake and you're going east on the Lake Loop bike path, and then you hit the blue or the purple dash line, and that looks like a segment, and like the bike route ended. But really, it does continue, and it goes up down Winnequa and all the way. So I think the intent behind this was to avoid double lines, but that adds to more confusion.
what is a bike route connector?
That is
That line that goes through your backyard, you mean?
shortcut.
Gee, I just don't, again, West Dean, we've got, I see, so it's okay if I'm not on the official
Table the
bike route, it's okay to cut across West Dean to get to it, right? So isn't that a connector? And shouldn't there be a connector down at, come on, everybody takes Winnequa all the way down to Monona Drive. Nobody takes that. Yeah, I mean, yes. But shouldn't there be something connecting down there too?
Right.
I'm with you, I found this very confusing. Are we required to have a bike route map in the comprehensive plan?
The transportation element statute says, and it contains a series of maps identifying transportation facilities, including, I think bicycle is mentioned in there, but there's no specific guidance. We can have it.
Well, it looks very official.
I was going to say, so what are we supposed to do?
All right, so, do we have to do anything with this, or?
I'll clean it up.
Clean it up.
Bike where they went up.
All right, anything else, Sonia?
No?
Nobody looks at a bike route.
Time. 7, staff report regarding status of development project proposals.
Next meeting is November 23rd. Royal Capital Group will be back for a 5th pre-hearing conference.
No.
See if I won't be here.
They have
You're
hired a new architect, JLA Architects, Jolie Architects, and a new engineering firm, Wade Weiser Engineering.
Have you seen it? Has it substantially changed?
I don't know.
There are some things that were changed if you wanted to go through bullet points of what the Plan Commission commented on. I think it's probably best to
Yeah,
give me
it's
some
not on
time
the
to
agenda.
review it.
Yeah, okay.
Gordon Flesch parking lot facade improvement will be back. Salon in the Dance Academy building on the south end of Monona Drive, proposed new use. And I'd like to get the comprehensive plan done, but I will overload the next agenda with both the sign code and maps, so we might see one of those items,
Okay,
but likely not both.
sounds good, thank you. Request for information? Some information, due to demands with the new position that Sharon's acquired, she doesn't feel she can give the commission the attention that it deserves, so she is going to no longer be with us, so we're going to be looking for another member. And I want to thank her for all her great work and years of service. She'll be deeply missed. Deeply missed. So, what else?
We have a new city administrator.
Yep.
April Little coming from the village of Belleville, and she'll start sometime in January is the tentative.
And Shadow Lane has a test of LED streetlights. So now that it gets dark at 5 o'clock, you can go down there and... Shadow, yep.
Okay. Going on Monona Drive too?
Yes, residential. Nothing else? Yes, sir.
Couple things. I did some research on the welcome sign, and I need to find some more information, but if you recall, we actually bought right-of-way from PDQ to put some of those signs in because there wasn't enough right-of-way. So my question is, I believe Monona bought that right-of-way. I think that was our responsibility, and neither the feds nor the county would put any money towards that. So it's quite possible that that sign where it's at right now might not be in the state right-of-way. Well, I meant to bring the plans, but if you look at the state right-of-way for Broadway, it goes down. We actually bought right-of-way where the Broadway sign sits.
From the state?
No, we bought from PDQ. We bought a sign easement from PDQ to put that sign in, the one that's parallel to Broadway. The one that's at an angle is further back than that. So I question, it's definitely not in the Broadway right-of-way extended. It is in the Monona Drive right-of-way, but did the state's right-of-way from Broadway turn and go up Monona Drive for another little bit? I don't know if they did or didn't. My guess is it might not even be in the state right away. If it's not, we can put our sign back.
The reader board portion.
Yes. Well, I don't know if anybody's really, I've had our surveyor working on it. He's got to go get more documents, but I'm not convinced. I don't know, but I'm not convinced it's in the state's right away.
So we have the surveyor working on it also.
Good.
From Monona Drive reconstruction, going back and finding out what was there. We also contacted Rob Call's office, who talked with the DOT, and they said that there is no sunset, if it is DOT right-of-way, there is no planned sunset date where that would go away.
But is it DOT right away is a great question.
And that's the question that we can look into more. Yeah. But if it is DOT right-of-way, they are willing to consider selling that off as surplus land. But we just have to identify exactly how much that is if it is DOT right of way.
I'm not sure if it is, but if it is, it certainly is not necessary for Broadway frontage. Because it's beyond, I know it's beyond X. I know we bought from PDQ where the sign that's parallel to Broadway is, and this is beyond that. So, I don't know, but my suspicion is it might not.
Maybe just update next time.
Yep,
so we
and
can
then in the
reach it.
meantime, we're also looking at a quote for masonry material as the alternative.
Yeah.
So it would look like everything else on Monona Drive. Right. It cannot be a duplication of Welcome to Monona. Thank you. Sir?
And then I'll be gone the next 2 meetings. I'm starting to feel like Griff.
I will be gone next meeting.
We're down 3.
We're down 3. We have a town all week. That's Thanksgiving week, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's one more.
There's one more. We better talk to Brian. Okay. All right. Motion to adjourn?
No move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those, yay.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Probably shouldn't have asked that.
I'd like to be here for that, honestly.
Oh, my God.